Alright, hello citizens of the Nigelverse, it is Nigel here once again. So, this video is the complete analysis of the Monday Night Wars. So some months ago, I did the Monday Night Wars. I revisited, for the most part, the war between the WWF and Monday Night Raw and WCW with Monday Nitro. And admittedly, I've talked before about it here on the channel how it didn't quite pan out as well as I would have liked, but I still did have quite a bit of fun with it. And so I decided to make this kind of compilation video. This video essentially serves two purposes. Either if you missed out on the original Monday Night Wars videos, and want to watch them again, and want to watch them in a condensed version, or B, if you did watch them and want to watch them again and in a condensed version, so that you don't have to go scouring up and down my channel. And it's not that far along the channel, but scouring up and down. Now you have it in a nice, easy and condensed format here, or so. So of course, and the original Monday Night Wars are still up on the on my channel, my analysis of the Monday Night Wars as well as my final analysis. So, if you want to, definitely go check those out. You can watch them if you want to watch a particular episode, or watch them in a particular order, or you still can. But for those who want to watch them and want to watch them in a condensed version, here you go. So, without further ado, thank you all so much for watching. If you do go on to enjoy this video, please do me a favor, like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends, and turn on post notifications. Every time I upload a video, see as soon as it drops. And let me know in the comments below if you enjoy, and because I did try to cover as much ground as possible, but because there was still some ground I didn't cover, I can always revisit these. So let me know if you guys do want me to revisit the Monday Night Wars at some point, and I'd be definitely more than happy to do so. But yeah, without further ado, thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy. Alright, hello citizens of the Nigelverse, it is Nigel once again. And so, right now, in the modern day and age, pro wrestling is seemingly as hot as it's ever been. And through a combination of WWE being cool again, AEW what they're doing, and the working relationship between WWE and TNA, plus of course the good old fashioned indies. But what if I told you it wasn't always like that? Excuse me. In fact, what if I told you there was a point in time where the business was almost on a bit of a downturn, but excuse me, there were two companies, through their own means, who were set to try to rectify that, and it led to them going to war, or considered one of the most successful periods is in pro wrestling history. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the Monday Night Wars. So, this is episode 1 of the Monday Night Wars. Episode 2 is coming out later on this week. This was supposed to come out last week, but things happen, of course. Yeah. So, I'm excited to be able to dive into the Monday Night Wars. Unfortunately, wasn't there to live, but hearing all the buzz around it from the people who were there, who experienced it in real time, has been fascinating. So, what were WCW up to? What happened when they went to war, and who exactly won the war? Let's find out. So, episode 1 here. There's gonna be 5 episodes in total. Episode 1 is gonna be tackling 1995 and 1996. Episode 2 is gonna be tackling 1997. Episode 3 is gonna be tackling 1998. Episode 4 is gonna be tackling 1999, and the last and final episode 5, is gonna be tackling both 2000 and 2001. Now, the reason I did that is because there's 5 weeks in July, and so we can have this done before July ends, hopefully. Yeah, but also because 1995, I have WCW, who didn't debut Monday Nitro until pretty late into 1995, and they didn't have a whole lot of time within 1995. At least compared to when they would have full years in 1996, 1997, 1998, 1999, and 2000, and the same with 2001, except kind of the opposite as WCW was closing its doors. So because they're kind of incomplete, at least in that regard, and they're not complete years, I decided to lump them together in those regards. But without further ado, who I am excited, so let's get right into it. So here we have the ratings. So how this analysis is going to work is that we have the ratings here. We have the ratings from week to week. WWF Monday Night Raw on the left, WCW Monday Nitro on the right. Now this is courtesy of of a couple different sources. One of them being Pro Wrestling Fandom, but you'll see some NAs here. Those are weeks where it went uncontested, or the data either one or one of the shows didn't air, or the data was hard to find, and this is the TV ratings for each week. And then we have our average down here. We have the WF average and WCW average. So we're gonna take a little stroll through. I'm probably not gonna read off every single number because there is a lot of them, but we are going to note some significant changes, if any, or some significant differences between Monday Night Raw and Monday Nitro. And here we have both the moments and storylines in WWF. I tried to include at least five. I've sadly only had 4 here. And we have some MVPs for both sides. Right, so without further ado, ratings first. So here on September 4th of 1995 was the first episode of Monday Nitro. And WF, excuse me, did not air that week. Monday Night Raw did not air. It's also worth mentioning this was when Monday Night Raw was pre-taped. Nowadays, of course, it's live with some exceptions, but this one it was pre-taped. And that's something that will come up later on in the Monday Night Wars. But you see, for this first episode, you see for the first episode, that Monday Nitro drew a 2.5 in the ratings. And then for the next couple weeks, you see Raw, Nitro not quite able to beat Raw in the ratings until this part, where Monday Nitro finally beats Monday Night Raw with Monday Nitro pulling a 2.7. Excuse me. Meanwhile, WWF pulling a 1.9. It's also worth mentioning, this is during the New Generation era. Really, 1995 and to an extent 1996 were pretty rough years for the business. I bring that up to kind of maybe explain some of these ratings, but you see them almost neck and neck, even tied a couple weeks, as you see here, including the October 2nd episode where they each got 2.5, and then the October 9th episode where they received 2.6, and you can see them getting legs up on each other. Raw beats Monday Nitro here, Monday Nitro beats Raw here, and I don't believe we're quite at the 83 weeks the 83 weeks streak of WCW beating Monday Night Raw just yet, so we see, like I said, back and forth. This week WCW didn't air, or the data they couldn't find. Same with WWF here, so you kind of see them going back and forth between the ratings, and I believe this may be beginning of the 83 weeks period where. Actually, right here, where WCW was beating Monday Night Raw in the ratings, and it's probably not a coincidence that this was around the time of the fallout from WCW Bash at the Beach 1996, with the formation of the NWO. Yeah, you can see here WCW just annihilating Monday Night Raw. There are a couple more weeks where one contested and Raw didn't have the data. You didn't have the data or didn't air for 2 weeks in a row. Oh, but yeah, so you can even see Raw. They increase at times, but they also start to dip down at points. Means so kind of going up and down. Meanwhile, WCW, who also going up and down for the most part, maintaining their lead over Monday Night Raw. So going down to the average here, excuse me, the average rating, based on my calculations, which I just did, the average, I did the average within the spreadsheet here of all of the weeks, and I guess it automatically took out the NAs, which is good. So WF has average between both 1995 and 1996 are about a 2.6. Excuse me, and because we're lumping in 1995 and 1996 with each other, I decided I would also lump in the ratings with each other, not quite separate them. And then meanwhile, as I plug in my laptop, uh, about down here, you can see that WCW has about an average rating of a 3.0. For the most part, at this point in the Monday Night Wars, WCW is winning. But what are some significant storylines in the companies at this point in time? I'm around 1995 to 1996. So some of the ones I took down for WF, and this isn't every single storyline, but a lot of the ones that A came to mind, and B were some pretty big ones. And we do see the rise of Stone Cold Steve Austin. Of course, Stone Cold Steve Austin came in, and former WCW superstar, or funnily enough, and that's a whole story within itself. But Austin at first started off in WWE as the ringmaster, as the protege of Ted DiBiase, winning the $1 Million Championship, but eventually abandoned it and kind of morphed into a Stone Cold persona, and of course cut that famous Austin 316 promo. After winning the 1996 King of the Ring, in the finals, he beat Jake Roberts, who Jake Roberts was doing of course born again, and so doing that at a storyline. So seeing the rise of Austin here, and that segues into the rivalry between Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Bret Hart, where we see the beginning of the double turn between Steve Austin and Bret Hart. Steve Austin did start off as a heel, funnily enough, but eventually Austin became more and more beloved by the fans, and it's very much no nonsense, tough SOB. And it's also worth mentioning the new generation, and like I mentioned, probably one of the worst eras in WWF history. I'd argue probably the worst era in WWF history. But Austin, being a much different character than like goofy day job gimmicks, was definitely a breath of fresh air, which I think helped it stand out a lot more. So Austin became more beloved by the faces. And meanwhile, while I plug in my laptop again, Bret Hart became more aggressive. Hung on to his Canadian fans and everything, but the American fans, he became a lot more hostile towards. And this is around the time where they start to kind of blur the lines between kayfabe and reality. Excuse me, including Hart outing Vince McMahon as kind of the chairman and everything. This is back when Vince McMahon was still a color commentator, didn't really become outed as the chairman, and just yet had slowly transitioning into it, and definitely we're not quite at the Mr. McMahon character just yet. That's the character we all know and love, and kind of hate in hindsight with some of the stuff that's come out. Another storyline of significance that I noted was The Undertaker versus Diesel. Well, it's not often you see yourself in a casket, but of course they faced off at WrestleMania 12. And then the rivalry between Shawn Michaels versus Bret Hart, including the Iron Man match, the first ever 60-minute Iron Man match between Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. A match that I know I'll review someday, likely around WrestleMania season. But I'm have to um, gonna have to set aside that hour to watch the match, of course. First, then there's King Mabel. I said notable storylines. I didn't necessarily say good ones. Yes, Mabel had won the 1995 King of the Ring in a tournament that also featured the likes of Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker. One of these things is not like the other. One of these things just doesn't belong. What? Mabel. Well, a man known for being very large, but also very reckless in the ring, including him injuring the Undertaker's face during a botch where he accidentally crushed the Undertaker's orbital bone, which led to Undertaker wearing that really cool Phantom of the Opera mask. But yeah, pop the King of the Ring on this guy. Put him in the main event of SummerSlam against Diesel. Yay! Yeah, and Diesel got hurt in that match as well. Excuse me. So, what can you do? But then next up is Razor Ramon versus Goldust. A storyline that kind of ages poorly in hindsight. Goldust and Razor are duking it out throughout, especially 1996 over the Intercontinental Championship, including some stuff that may offend members of the LGBTQ community nowadays definitely different times back then, and you can see even with that storyline that would be kind of going more into that like edgy kind of risque territory, or kind of a precursor of things to come when it comes to the Attitude Era. But of course, in the Monday Night Wars, not quite there yet. And the last one that I put down for notable is the debut of Rocky Maivia. Which his name is an amalgamation of his father, of course, Rocky Johnson, Soulman Rocky Johnson, and his grandfather, High Chief Peter Maivia. So Rocky Maivia makes his debut at the 1995, or I believe 1996 Survivor Series. 1996 Survivor Series. He's and ends up winning it for his team. And of course he started off as the white meat blue chipper babyface, but the people didn't like it that much, chanting things like "Die Rocky Die" and everything. And so when will this little pebble become the Rock? You'll have to stick with the Monday Night Wars in order to find out. But let's see what WCW was up to at this time. So the notable storylines that I have. Finish off my Sprite here, which is probably why I'm burping so much. My apologies, but the storylines I have of significance majorly for WCW that I can think of and that I could find, and was of course the Dungeon of Doom versus the Alliance and Hulkamania, or I think that should be a slash, as they didn't fight each other; they were one and the same. So, the Dungeon of Doom, very wacky storyline, very wacky stable, which included the likes of Kevin Sullivan, aka the Taskmaster, or King Curtis Ikea, the Giants, the future Big Show, the Zodiac, formerly Bruce the Barber Beefcake, not quite the Booty Man just yet, but him and Post Butcher as well. Bruce Barber, Beefcake. What? And man, like, you talk about savage. Bruce Beefcake and Hulk Hogan, at least in kayfabe, have had a very up and down relationship. And speaking of which, it's a group designed to put an end to Hulkamania, as the name would suggest. And were they kind of successful in doing so? Perhaps, because the next storyline that of significance that I've put down is the formation of the NWO. Excuse me, I'm gonna get into it more when I do my review of Bash at the Beach 1996. That's coming out later on tonight. But of course, there's Hulk Hogan and turned his back on the red and yellow, turned his back on the WCW fans, joined up with the outsiders, that being Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, revealed himself as the third man at at WCW Bash in the Beach 1996. Hicks, Hicks and formed the New World Organization at first. Now, contrary to popular belief, he did say New World Organization, but he also did mention it's a New World Order. So I guess both. But yeah, so we see the formation of the NWO. Eventually, we would see a lot more people joining up the NWO throughout the years, for better or for worse, including Eric Bischoff being revealed as the leader in charge. Everything kind of interesting parallel between the two. Who Eric Bischoff does have Vince McMahon beat by a little bit. It's but Eric Bischoff being that heel authority figure, being the bankroller, being the man in charge of the NWO. Excuse me. So good on you, Eric, for being Vince to the punch. But as Vince McMahon and apparently said, I don't think I ever heard him say it, but as he apparently said, whoever laughs last laughs best. I guess. But the next thing we have, and I capitalize it because it's a proper noun, that being Crow Sting. So at first there was speculation of if Sting was going to join the NWO. Oh, Sting, the super colorful, beloved babyface, was he going to join up with the NWO? A lot of people seem to think so, including a lot of the people in the back. Within kayfabe, of course. So Sting secluded himself, distanced himself from his friends who were accusing him of joining. There was even a fake Sting for a little while who was part of the NWO, but it obviously wasn't the real Sting. So for the next 18 months into 1997, where we'll go into more detail about it here within episode 2, Sting sat in the rafters, being the eye of justice, looking down upon the NWO. Eventually waiting for his moment to strike and take down the NWO. So would he be successful? You'll have to stick with the Monday Night Wars, of course. And finally, Lex Luger, her jumping ship from WCW to the WWF, and this was a week after her, I believe, SummerSlam 1995, where Lex Luger, her left WWE, showed up in WCW, or I should say WWF, that is, and showed up in WCW. It was a very unexpected moment, of Lex Luger so soon after having been on WWF TV, now finding himself in WCW the very next week on Nitro, and I believe it was the debut episode of Nitro where he appeared. So definitely a hell of a statement to make on your her debut episode. Then Lex Luger would continue to be in WCW, I believe pretty much up until it closed. It was, but a pretty major moment there. It's something that doesn't happen too often, but when it does, it's always surprising and always adds a lot of interest. A more modern equivalent I can think of is the time where WWE accidentally didn't upgrade Malachi Black's contract, so he showed up in AEW pretty soon after, where people thought they would at least have to wait 90 days to see Malachi Black in AEW. Nope, he showed up within the 30 days. He only had a 30-day non-compete clause in 791. In fact, I think he showed up sooner than that in AEW. I know it was pretty short after his exit from WWE, but yeah, so pretty major moment there. All right, now getting into some of the MVPs that I've taken down for both WWE and WCW. That's what I meant to do. The first one being The Undertaker. Sadly, for better or for worse, WWE, for better or for worse, I should say, Undertaker always a reliable hand, and for better because he gave the fans a lot of memorable moments featuring the dead man, but for worse because Undertaker oftentimes had to put over the brand new giant WWE. He did during the New Generation. He did somewhat during the Attitude Era. He did it during the Ruthless Aggression Era. He kind of did in the PG era. Undertaker having to put over the big bad monster. Her two mixed results, but the Undertaker still a reliable hand in that regard as well. Then, of course, being the next up being Shawn Michaels, because of course, or in fact, admittedly, throughout the Monday Night Wars, you're gonna see a lot of these names repeat. But Shawn Michaels, of course, the Heartbreak Kid, the Showstopper, the biggest backstage politician indeed. But he was so talented, he was able to get away with it. But then next up, Bret Hart, for a lot of the aforementioned reasons, and seeing the evolution of his character work as he became more aggressive and leaned more towards heel, and Stone Cold Steve Austin, same for aforementioned reason, and transitioning into more of that, not quite full on face, but more in that anti-hero role that he fits so well. Them and being major parts of WWF programming going forward, and then Razor Ramon on especially within the IC title picture. Of course, he and Shawn Michaels had their rivalry, not quite in 1995, but 1994, over who the real Intercontinental Champion is. They had a rematch at SummerSlam because something had to save the card. At SummerSlam 1995, that is putting over the 1-2-3 Kid, having his kind of alliance and everything with the Kid, of course. But now we move into the WCW MVPs. He's the first one being Hulk Hogan, and the next one, of course, being the NWO. Kind of for a lot of the same reasons. Hulk Hogan came in, was the Ren did really great business for WCW, but as the Black and White, as the leader of the NWO, that's where things definitely got interesting. And seeing Hogan's character, seeing Hogan as a heel for the first time since I believe since the 70s. Hulk Hogan had started off as a heel back, I believe, when he was Sterling Golden, and now being a heel once again, and being a very interesting and captivating character, no longer being for the fans, and of course the NWO recruiting a lot of members, a few too many, but again, not quite there yet. But next up, Sting, even though Sting really didn't do anything but sit in the Raptors, but sometimes less is more, and the story of Sting distancing himself of becoming the Crow, morphing into the Crow, being the Eye of Justice, waiting as the fans waited with bated breath for the day that he would finally confront Hollywood Hogan, and definitely made for some interesting TV there. And then DDP, because it's DDP, Diamond Dallas Page, always a reliable hand, and of course Ric Flair, because it's Ric Flair. This was after Ric Flair had came back to actually he had been back in WCW for a while, but Ric Flair, part of the Four Horsemen, would also find himself tangled up with the NWO as well. But we'll get to that later on down the line. So, that is episode 1 of the Monday Night War. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Sorry, it is late, of course, but I hope you still enjoyed. If you did, please do me a favor: like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends, and turn on post notifications so you know every time I upload a video, so you can see when it drops. And let me know in the comments your thoughts. Are you excited for the Monday Night Wars? Or do you like this format? Do you think I should change it up? Have any suggestions for that? Let me know. Thank you all so much for watching, but don't touch that dial, because later on tonight is going to be my review of the Outsiders and Hulk Hogan versus Team WCW at WCW's Bash of the Beach 1996. But until then, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you guys later. Peace. Alright, hello, citizens of the Nigelverse. It's Nigel once again, and welcome back to the Monday Night Wars. So, the bad news is that my fan has stopped working, so I may or may not burn up here. But the good news is we've got another installment of the Monday Night Wars, and this week, because we are very, very far behind, this week will be the next 3 episodes of the Monday Night Wars. But if you missed the first installment, I recommend going back and checking that out. But just to give you a brief recap, some of the things that's going on between WWE and WCW up to this point in time. We looked at both 1995 and 1996 in terms of ratings and storylines. So around this time, NWO has formed. They are starting to run a roughshod over WCW, and and WCW is beating Raw in the ratings, and we are firmly within the 83 week time period where Nitro dominated Raw in the ratings. But what happens when Raw and the WF as a whole finally shed off the last of the new generation and cocoon and emerge the Attitude Era Butterfly? Hey, let's find out. So, we have, of course, the ratings from 1997, and unlike what we did last time, 1997, because it was a full year, full calendar year. Here we're looking at the ratings. We got our averages. I'm not gonna go week by week and talk about each rating. Just kind of talk about a lot of the trends and also, we have our storylines and some of our MVPs. Is who was really making an impact around both WF and WCW at this time. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. So, first getting into our ratings here, and I'm gonna kind of go through. Like I said, I'm not gonna go week by week and talk about the rating. But I'll show you guys here so you can try your best to follow along. But what you're gonna see is that we are in the 83 week period, meaning Raw does not beat Nitro a single week in the ratings. And what we can see here, as you can see, pointing by my mouse, starting with the first episode, that being on January 6th of 1997, and we see that Nitro does fluctuate, and they do go up and down. So you start with a 3 and then go 3.4, 3.7, and you can see even here around the February 17th episode where they dip down to a 2.9, but then come right back up. There are, just like last time, there are a couple weeks that go uncontested. Go uncontested, such as this week, where I imagine either Nitro didn't air that week, or it was insufficient data. That being obviously the July 21st episode, which technically would have been yesterday. And also how appropriate having the Monday Night Wars on a Monday, and we're gonna conclude next week on a Monday, of course, but. We see WCW, and they go all the way up to a 4.4 and even a 4.8 here. So WCW, who for the most part doing solid enough number, he's got 4.6, 4.3. And they end off the year on December 29th, which is one of my friend's birthdays actually, but. They end off with a 4.6, giving Nitro an average of about 3.7 for the year, or at least based on my calculation, which you can see by the formula here. It's the same for Raw. As for Nitro, that being just taking the average, and it's obviously minus the NA here, which, speaking of which, let's see how Raw is doing. So, Raw, very far behind. We do see some rises, but also some falls, including dipping down to 1.9 here on the March 3rd episode. We see them climb back up, and you see the week that went contested Raw actually did 4.1, which is pretty solid. There were a couple other weeks that went contested, both the August 25th and September 1st episodes. Was a Raw, and you see some 3s, you see some 3.4, you see even a 3.6. So Raw ends off with a 3.6, giving them a yearly average of 2.6, which is a very, very big difference between Raw and Nitro at this point in terms of the ratings and their kind of overall score. But as we're going to get into in the storylines, Raw is undergoing a change, and Raw does need to do something, and they need to do something quick because they are falling very far behind when it comes to WCW, who and this is around the time where Raw and the WF ultimately end up finding their attitude. And in terms of notable moments and storylines in WF, you can see one of them is the beginning of the Attitude Era. Yes, as the Attitude Era. It kind of somewhat officially began, and people have debated where the Attitude Era began. Some say it began with the Montreal Screwjob, which we'll get to. Some say it began with Austin, everything he was doing. Some would say it even began and with Brian Pillman, the loose cannon, and I don't quite have Brian Pillman here, and I definitely should have. But Brian Pillman, of course, jumping ship from WCW over to first ECW and the WF, and the story of how Brian Pillman jumped ship from WCW over to ECW and tooled the loose cannon gimmick even more is a fascinating one, and so. Brian Pillman essentially convinced hence Eric Bischoff in storyline to kind of trade him over. And I know I'm kind of paraphrasing some of the story here, but essentially the gist of it, at least if I'm remembering it correctly, is Brian Pillman convincing Eric Bischoff to trade him over to ECW as part of storyline, but Brian Pillman ends up swerving, and he drives and swerves over Eric Bischoff and joins ECW for reals. I guess as I was gonna make a joke about that, but it'll kind of spoil later on. But anyway, so Brian Pillman's character of the loose cannon, admittedly, was definitely a bit of a trailblazer when it comes to the Attitude Era. Even though he ultimately wasn't in WWE long, as he ended up passing away in 1997, and Brian Pillman definitely seeing some of the things, and this is right before the Attitude Era began, and like officially in WWE / WF, which does suck, but at a lot of the beginnings of some of the things that would be commonplace in the Attitude Era, more specifically blurring the lines between kayfabe and reality to the point where even the fellow wrestlers didn't quite know when things were work or a shoot, versus such as when Brian Pillman grabbed Tony Schiavone for real in WCW. So Brian Pillman blurring those lines, and in the Attitude Era definitely blurred those lines as well. Vince McMahon even cut a promo, kind of beginning the Attitude Era, talking to the audience, kind of like lifting the curtain. So it kind of makes that the whole curtain call incident seem kind of hypocritical, which I did hit the previous episode, not this episode, System Shock Radio that came out yesterday, but the one before. I talked about the curtain call / Madison Square Garden incident. So if you haven't already, go check that out. But Vince McMahon talking about how the people are tired of having their intelligence insulted, and pretty much announcing the Attitude Era. So the Attitude Era coming into full swing, essentially, or at least the beginnings of it. It would definitely take more shape as the year goes on, especially in 1998. But what else was going on in the WF around this time? We of course have the Montreal Screwjob. Now, the Montreal Screwjob, I'm sure even if you're a non-wrestling fan, you've probably heard of it. I've even talked about it on this channel. I reviewed the match, that being Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels at Survivor Series 1997. If you haven't already, go check out that review. But essentially, to give you the cliff notes, Bret Hart was locked in the sharpshooter by Shawn Michaels, and infamously Vince McMahon called for the bell, and Bret Hart got a little bit upset at it, and Bret Hart essentially screwed out of the WWF Championship. If he was going, originally the plan was he was going to drop the WWF Championship because he was WWF champion at the time, and obviously now it went to Michaels after this match. As Bret was gonna drop the WWF Championship the next night, Raw vacated because his contract was coming to an end, and Vince McMahon admitted to Bret Hart that they weren't able to honor his contract, and that and the issues Bret was having, not just with Vince himself, but obviously with Shawn Michaels, very legendary rivalry, him and Shawn Michaels, both on and off camera, very legendary, infamous rivalry. But nevertheless, Bret Hart essentially was on his way to WCW, and so And so, Vince decided this would be the best course of action to take the title off of Bret Hart. Right now, people have gone back and forth as to whether or not this was a good thing or a bad thing. Because on one hand, Vince McMahon essentially screwed over his top talent, and it led to a lot of bitter feelings for years. By Bret Hart and quite a bit of resentment. Eventually, he and Vince buried the hatchet, and he and Shawn Michaels buried the hatchet as well. But it did lead to a lot of very bitter feelings from the Hitman. And if Goldberg is anything to go by, Bret definitely knows how to hold a grudge, but we're not quite there yet. On the other hand, it is kind of also what really helped jump the Attitude Era. A lot of people feel like this was definitely what began the Attitude Era as well, um, and it also will help form the Vince McMahon character, or the character that would go on to antagonize Stone Cold Steve Austin and whoever else was beloved by the fans. Vince McMahon became he became like the evil old corporate leader, or kind of similar to what Eric Bischoff was doing, being the leader of the NWO and everything. And so all of that stems from the Montreal Screwjob. But then, and the other thing that a lot of people feel will help kickstart the Attitude Era was the formation of D-Generation X. Initially Shawn Michaels and Triple H, but eventually they would add more members to the ranks, including the Road Dogg, Jesse James, the Badass Billy Gunn, who actually had formed the New Age Outlaws prior to his Road Dogg started off as kind of like the protege to Jeff Jarrett. And of course that both fit both with the double J and everything, and Road Dogg even in storyline, and kind of being the voice behind the song "With My Baby Tonight," but of course, Jeff Jarrett took credit for it. So Jeff Jarrett essentially pulled a Milli Vanilli, but got rewarded for it instead of punished. At least Jeff Jarrett was smart enough not to let the track skip and check the disc as it was playing. But nevertheless, Billy Gunn was rockabilly and was kind of the protege to the Honky Tonk Man, and so Billy Gunn eventually turned on Honky Tonk Man, and to form up with Road Dogg, they formed the New Age Outlaws. And the rest is history. One of a lot of people's favorite tag teams. Of course, they had the legendary intro as well. The Road Dogg, Jesse James, the Badass Billy Gunn. And it's crazy to think Billy Gunn's still actually wrestling, performing to this day. Yeah. So D-Generation X coming together, but for now, we're in Triple H and Shawn Michaels territory. Triple H, Shawn Michaels, and of course Chyna, who was the real life girlfriend of Triple H at the time, and we'll definitely get to that, of course. But how that kind of unfolded and everything, that's kind of a messy situation, but that's for later on. But D-Generation X, essentially running their own roughshod through the WWF, of being very sophomores, very much frat boys. He's pushing the envelope open, being controversial, being very abrasive, getting into it with Commissioner Slaughter and any form of authority. He definitely anti-authority, although they were very much more in the vein of heels. And that also segues into Undertaker versus you see Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels here. They had their feud as well, but then also leading into Undertaker versus Kane, and these two kind of intersected. So it was at Bad Blood 1997, and where the first ever Hell in a Cell match took place. between the Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. Essentially, the story being Shawn Michaels constantly ducking the Undertaker. These two had been battling throughout quite a bit of 1997, and stemming from Shawn Michaels accidentally costing the Undertaker the WWF Championship at SummerSlam when he was a special guest referee. Shawn Michaels. Well, the stipulation was that Shawn Michaels had to call it absolutely right down the middle, daddy, or else he would be banned from wrestling in the United States. So he was the special guest referee between the match of Undertaker and Bret Hart, Bret Hart, or spit in Shawn Michaels' face. So Shawn responded by trying to thwack Bret Hart with a chair, but instead had caught the Undertaker, so accidentally costing him there. And from there, Bret Hart beat the Undertaker, and the feud between Undertaker and Shawn Michaels really kicked into high gear there. So, but it's also famously at Bad Blood 1997, not just the debut of the Hell in a Cell, but also the debut of Kane, that being the Undertaker's younger brother. So at this point, Paul Bearer had turned on the Undertaker, and Paul Bearer threatened him to reveal a secret. And the secret was that Undertaker had inadvertently killed his parents in the house fire, his parents and his younger brother. But his younger brother survived. Kane, if you think about it, Kane and Darth Vader almost have the same origin, and if you can believe it. But as Kane showed up for revenge against the Undertaker, at first Undertaker didn't want to fight his younger brother, but eventually his hand was forced. But we'll get to that when we get to that, because that's later on in the timeline. But then we had Goldust, and the artist formerly known as Goldust. The actor was a lot of things. It was successful, it was controversial, and it was pretty weird at times. And Goldust definitely weird and controversial. The artist formerly known as Goldust began and being accompanied by Luna Vachon, which was kind of kind of had like a dominatrix role. Well, think of like Rhea Ripley and Dominic Mysterio. Their kind of relationship affiliation nowadays, but way edgier and way weirder, and with way more of that 90s stuff that definitely didn't age well today. Just very weird time. But we mentioned Undertaker for Shawn Michaels. Then we have the Nation of Domination, and consisting of a number of members, including Farouk, D'Lo Brown, Mark Henry, and The Rock. No, not Rocky Maivia anymore, or Rocky Maivia turned heel, joined the Nation of Domination, became The Rock. Eventually led to a power struggle with The Rock taking over the Nation of Domination, and using that to really help propel them further into superstardom, and they say the rest is history. Rocky is a lot of things, but sucks is not one of them. His words, not mine. And the Nation of Domination would feud with D-Generation X, leading to a very interesting segment that is aged like a nice tall glass of milk on a hot summer's day, and that is where I'll leave it. And next up, worth mentioning is Ken Shamrock, the world's most dangerous man, and making the crossover from MMA into the WWE. He eventually leading to Dan the Beast Severn doing the same thing. Ken Shamrock was the special guest referee at WrestleMania 13 in the submission match between Stone Cold Steve Austin and Bret Hart. And eventually from there, Ken Shamrock signed with WWE, became a part of WWE programming, found some success there. He was Intercontinental Champion. A lot of people felt like he was definitely ahead of his time, and that if he had debuted like today, now that's an MMA WWF relationship is now pretty much a thing under Endeavor and everything, and that he would have a lot more success But if you think about it, would he though? Because in a way, Ken Shamrock was kind of a trailblazer. Like if Ken Shamrock hadn't been one of the first to do it, would we have had the crossover from people like Dan Severn or Ronda Rousey or Shayna Baszler or the Four Horsewomen of the MMA, or Matt Riddle, so Ken Shamrock kind of a trailblazer in that regard. Someone has to be the first, of course. And then, of course, I mentioned the aforementioned Mr. McMahon. But what's happening over in WCW? The first thing of note is Hulk Hogan versus Sting. Really, this began back in 1996. I mentioned in the previous episode of the Monday Night Wars, where Sting, he distanced himself from all his friends because he was accused of being a part of the NWO. But Sting, for 18 months, sat up in the rafters, looking down upon the NWO. And people anxiously waited for the day where Sting would finally strike and knock Hogan off his perch. And it kind of came they had their match at Starrcade 1997, which I've mentioned before. Starrcade, for WCW, essentially their equivalent of WrestleMania. Hogan and Sting did have their match at 18 months of build, the most successful pay-per-view that WCW ever did, in a lot of part due to this build. The build was phenomenal. 18 months. People didn't think the storyline was possible until the Bloodline storyline came along, and that storylines lasted even longer. But 18 months back then, and building towards the battle between Hogan and Sting. But why did it crash and burn? Well, I had talked about it. On the channel around when Cody lost to Roman the first time around, kind of to show you that, hey, WWE might have committed a bit of a blunder here, or at least a lot of people felt at the time. But WCW wasn't immune to it either, so if you haven't already, go check out that review. But as for this one, yeah, sadly didn't pan out the way it could have and or should have. I mentioned it before and I mentioned it again. And unfortunately, Hogan got way too much offense. Which asking Hogan to sell for Sting would be like asking a 2-year-old to do calculus. Probably wasn't gonna happen. But unfortunately, Hogan got way too much offense in, and they messed up the finish. So somebody screwed up, whether it was Nick Patrick, the referee, or somebody getting in his ear, or essentially what was supposed to happen is and again, kind of the cliff notes, because I kind of went into more detail about it in my review there, so go check it out. But essentially, Nick Patrick was allegedly supposed to do a fast count, did a regular count, so Sting looked like he straight up lost, and then Bret Hart reversed the decision. Bret Hart was in WCW at this time, but Bret Hart reversed the decision. Sting and put away Hogan with the Scorpion Deathlock and won the World Championship. But it was a really weird look, and it looked like and Sting kind of looked like the heel here, that he lost fair and square, and had to get help in order to capture the WCW championship. So, definitely a big blunder, and sign that despite the successes, WCW is not infallible. But but the other things of note that I have is Hulk Hogan versus Roddy Piper, or Hollywood Hogan, I should say. I'll probably interchange between the two. It is Hollywood Hogan versus Roddy Piper, with Piper being brought in to WCW in 1997 to confront and Hogan and to stand up to Hogan, and of course continuing their rivalry from the WWF days back during the golden era, during the Hulkamania era, what have you, and it led to some questionable decision making. It's a questionable booking when it comes to Hogan versus Piper. Or there have been other people who have explained Piper's entire time in WCW who way better than this, but notably they faced off at both Bash at the Beach and and Halloween Havoc, and actually, I got the time mixed up. I believe it was Starcade the previous year where Hogan and Piper fought, and then not Bash the Beach, Halloween Havoc '97, where they had the big cage, which led to a very boring match within the cage, and Macho Man pretty much pulling in Adam Copeland, or inversely, I guess, because it happened first. Adam Copeland at Double or Nothing pulling a Macho Man and pretty much like messing up his leg by diving off the top of the cage. It was a mess, but. Yes, but next up, the other things we have of note is the rise of Goldberg. Yes, this was around the time where Goldberg was rising to prominence, and Goldberg is credited for being one of the few homegrown WCW success stories. And he's essentially a one-trick pony with a hell of a trick, and that trick is pretty much annihilating whoever was dumb enough to stand across the ring from him. And Goldberg's presentation was simple but effective. It didn't have a whole lot of flashy colors. Here's he had a cool entrance coming from the back, like with the pyro and everything. Ain't nothing really flashy, just absolute dominance. So, racking up a 100, I believe 131 and 0 streak, which would come to an end in 1998, and we'll obviously get to that. But Goldberg essentially being built as this big deal. Asking the question, who's next? And Bill Goldberg, definitely, he still continues to be probably one of the biggest success stories for WCW, at least homegrown success stories. He's obviously would stay there, like pretty much close till the end of WCW, who eventually made his way to WWF, not WWF, WE. It was WE by the time he made it there, and so was Oates there, and the rest from there was history. But then next up we have the NWO versus DDP, because the NWO needed something to do while Hogan was and to an extent Savage were off in the main events. And one of the storylines was DDP. DDP one of the stars to really resist the temptation of joining the NWO. Where it seemed like a lot of people were joining the NWO left and right. A few too many, but DDP was the one to resist, really emerging as a fan favorite, the People's Champion, and as he became known as just combating the NWO men, and never really joining and constantly combating the NWO. But next we have the Flock, of course, Raven, making his way from ECW to WCW, who over a lack of pay, which lack of pay, and ECW go together like peanut butter and jelly. But Haven making his way over to WCW, who kind of turning his playground, having the Flock, another major heel stable. And of course, comparing this heel stable, the Flock, to the other major heel stable, that being the NWO. Only one of them can really get the prime limelight, but the Flock still did their thing in the mid card, consisting of members such as Perry Saturn and Billy Kidman, but the Flock running rampant, next up we have Eddie Guerrero versus Rey Mysterio. And we'll get to it, but man, the cruiserweight scene, definitely in WCW, that was another one of their major claims to fame, was the cruiserweight championship title picture, and especially the Lucha Libre wrestling, being present within WCW, who as well, and Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio is a prime example of that, leading to what a lot of people consider to be one of the best WCW matches is in company history at Halloween Havoc 1997. It's a match that, if you haven't already, definitely recommend checking it out. I reviewed it quite a while ago. I think it was one of the first wrestling reviews I did. So go check that out. And And yeah, like, hey, and if you even if you've seen it already, watch it again because it is that good. But in fact, I'm thinking about watching it again, maybe re-reviewing it. I've been thinking about doing re-reviews, and that's definitely one that would definitely be very high on the list of re-reviews. But the last one we have here is Conan and Conan, who all like the luchadors who were killing WCW brought over. Conan is to thank for quite a few of the kind of being kind of the middleman, kind of the conduit for helping these guys get in WCW, including Rey Mysterio, which is why Rey Mysterio and Conan have such a tight bond. Conan would also eventually join the NWO, and become K Dog and everything. So there's that as well. As for our MVP, he's in WF. There's quite a few MVPs I had. First being, of course, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and we're not quite as coronation just yet, but he is definitely ascending to the throne. We have Bret Hart, who even though he ended up leaving under the controversial circumstances, still did his thing in his feud with Austin, and which also carried into 1997, including the double turn and everything. In his feud with Austin, in his feud with Undertaker, in his feud with Shawn Michaels. Which, speaking of which, Shawn Michaels and Hunter Hearst Helmsley / Triple H, D-Generation X, both as solo and as a team. Then there's the Undertaker, which the Undertaker at this time, I'm dressing a lot more dressing a lot edgier to fit the times of the Attitude Era. So props him for the commitment. Then there's Kane, who bursts onto the scene in the aforementioned Hell in a Cell match at Bad Blood 1997. And then there's Mankind, and Mankind, of course, doing. Of course, Mick Foley, former Cactus Jack. And I really I should say Mick Foley. Yeah, because we did see some of the faces of Foley here, but Mankind rising up as well, including with his feud with the Undertaker and with Shawn Michaels, and Triple H, and The Rock. Like I said, no longer Rock Maivia, but The Rock. Now we see some a lot of these guys rising to prominence here, but they'll be even bigger figures as we continue through the Attitude Era and the Monday Night Wars. Whereas as for WCW, the few I put down were Sting, especially from a storytelling perspective, helping carry the feud for the 18 months. On Diamond Dallas Page for the aforementioned reasons, combating the NWO, becoming the People's Champion. Goldberg, his rise to prominence, his rise to status. The NWO being the major heel faction, and the Cruiserweight division, because they definitely were killing it, and in some cases even making up for the inequities of the main event scene. But nevertheless, that's going to do it for this episode of the Monday Night Wars. Stay tuned. What we're going to do is Monday, Wednesday, and Friday will be the episodes of the Monday Night Wars. So stay tuned for Wednesday for the next one. Now that WF has found its attitude, can they finally come back in the ratings and bring the fight back to WCW? Stay tuned and find out, and how things unfold now that Sting is WCW champion. Of course, he won it at Starrcade. And how will the Attitude Era evolve from there? Find out how next time in the Monday Night Wars. But nevertheless, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please do me a favor. Like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends, and turn on post notifications so you know every time I upload a video so you can see the drops. And let me know in the comments your thoughts on this episode of the Monday Night War. Or isn't it? Are you excited for the next one and your reaction to everything and going on so far? Stay tuned later on tonight because we're going to have our match to tie in with the Monday Night Wars. Or at least this episode of the Monday Night Wars. But nevertheless, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you guys later. Peace. Alright, hello citizens of the Nigelverse. It is Nigel here once again, and welcome back to the Monday Night Wars. Real quick before we get into it, a couple things for start. I had tried to do this one last week, but my audio cut out, so we're trying again this week. But also, as I seek to finish up the Monday Night Wars, we are a bit past due, but we will try our best to make it work. What I am going to do is that every Monday will be the next Monday Night Wars analysis will be the next episode of the Monday Night Wars analysis, and with the subsequent review for the day. So, we're gonna do it that way. But nevertheless, let's see what's going down on here and on Monday Night Raw and Monday Nitro. So if you remember from the last episode, we are still in the period of the 83 weeks where WCW Monday Nitro was on top. The NWO still going strong, running roughshod. Sting faced Hogan for the title. He beat him for it, but not without controversy at Starrcade 1997, and he would eventually gain it back for reals this time at Super Brawl 8 in February 1998. Or I believe it was February 1998, but Sting would gain it back in 1998, gain the WCW Championship. There's other things going on in the undercard, such as the Cruiserweight division. The Cruiserweight division is on fire, especially with guys like Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero and Billy Kidman at the helm. Meanwhile, in the WWF is finding its attitude. Bret Hart is out because of the Montreal Screwjob. D-Generation X is officially formed. The first Hell in a Cell is in the books. Stone Cold Steve Austin is continuing his main event rise. So let's see what's going down here in 1998. So, if you've seen these before, or if you've seen these episodes of the Monday Night Wars before, you kind of already know how this works or have an idea of how this works. But if you haven't, what we have here is the ratings for both with Monday Night Raw and Monday Nitro. So, Raw on the left, Monday Nitro on the right, and on the far left is the date. So let's see what's going down. We're not gonna go week by week, just as noting some things of interest. One thing of interest is that for the first time on the April 13th episode of Monday, on the April 13th episode of both Raw and Nitro, Raw finally snaps the 83-week streak, and finally beats Monday Nitro in the ratings. We'd see them kind of go back and forth when it comes to ratings over the next few weeks, but Raw's finally beat them in the ratings here, including in this week where Raw got a 5.7 and Nitro only did a 1.72. And we're seeing a very significant dip. We see Raw, and I know I am gonna go kind of fast, but feel free to pause at any moment so you can get a really good look at the ratings. But we see Raw kind of somewhat steady for the most part. We see them stay within the 3s and the 4s, and we see them jump up to 5 from time to time, but otherwise staying in the 3s and 4s, so managing to do really well and keep their head above water. As now, in 1998, we are full swing into the Attitude Era, and you'll also notice that after the March 30th episode of Raw here, that Raw doesn't dip under 3, so it's 4 and above from that point forward. So Raw finally finding its footing now that it's found its attitude, finally fighting back when it comes to that. And meanwhile, with Nitro, we see them in the 4s and the 5s. But we also see them dip down at points into the 1s, into the 2s, but those are the only kind of couple outliers. The 1, 2 there. The rest is either 4, 5, or 3. But funnily enough, even despite both sides and how they are doing with their ratings, they both reach an average of 4.4, and you can see I calculated based off just taking the average of each for the Raw column and the Nitro column. So they both have a but they both have a 4.4 average based on my calculations for the year. So Raw officially in fight back mode and having Nitro on the ropes at times. But As for what kind of storyline stuff are going on in the company at the time, for starters, in the WWF, The Rock has become the corporate champion. He turned heel, winning the Deadly Games tournament at Survivor Series 1998. This was after the title was vacated after Austin refused to declare a new champion. So Austin, in continuing, and you can see here, continuing his feud with Vince McMahon, and to an extent the corporation throughout 1998, including we'll get more into it, but Austin was stripped of the WWE Championship. At first, he was double pinned by Kane and Undertaker when they had their triple threat at Breakdown, if I'm not mistaken. But then, and the title is vacated, so Undertaker and Kane are going to fight each other or to declare a new champion, and Austin is a special guest referee, but Austin and doesn't count, doesn't properly he declare a new champion. Instead, crowns himself the winner of the match, which is not how that works, but yeah, so the title is held up for the time being, and so the Deadly Games tournament is put in place at Survivor Series 1998, and the Deadly Games tournament considered one of the crowning achievements of not just the Attitude Era, but especially Vince Russo's booking of the WWF at this time. Vince Russo, of course, was the I believe the head writer at this time in WWF. But yeah, so the Survivor Series Deadly Games tournaments was as one of the big things, one of the crowning achievement when it comes to the Attitude Era. If there's one thing that Vince Russo did right, it was definitely tournaments. But at first, it seemed like Mankind was going to be the corporate champion, and Mankind and Vince having kind of a father-son relationship on screen. Mankind being very naive to Vince McMahon and his true nature, his true treachery, but ultimately it was a swerve, bro. As the Rock turned heel, locked the sharpshooter in on Mankind. Vince called for the bell, and the Rock was declared the new champion. Sound familiar? So Rock is the new corporate champion, and the Rock and Mankind would feud for the rest of the year, or for the rest of 1998 after Survivor Series. And into 1999. But next up, speaking of Undertaker and Kane, they had united. It kind of going at each other, or such as at WrestleMania 14 and in the aforementioned Triple Threat, but had also joined up as the Brothers of Destruction, and Undertaker admitting to starting the fire that killed his parents in the funeral home. So, yay, yikes! But they join up as the Brothers of Destruction, but they still come to blows. Are still at odds at times, but. And another thing that I forgot to mention here, in my notes here, but it is also worth mentioning, this is around the time of the Brawl for All. You remember the Brawl for All? Good, me neither. But imagine, and for those of you who are unaware of the Brawl for All, imagine a bunch of shoot boxing matches is kind of designed to get one guy over. That guy doesn't get hit over, and we'll see what happens with the winner, that being Bart Gunn. We'll see what happens with him come 1999. But yeah, I said notable moments of storylines. I didn't say good ones. But yeah, so the Brawl for All kind of, and I know I'm kind of breezing past it. Really, that could be its own video. In fact, Brian Zane over at Wrestling with Regret did a video about it many moons ago. But yeah, Brawl for All, very bad idea. And the guy who was kind of supposed to get over, that being Dr. Death Steve Williams, ended up getting eliminated within the tournament. You had guys like Dan Severn back out of the tournament, yeah. So just not everything that glittered in the Attitude Era was gold. But next up, as I mentioned earlier, Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Mr. McMahon. Pretty much on essentially a week-to-week basis, Steve Austin making the boss's life a living hell, including attacking Vince McMahon at multiple points. attacking him with the Zamboni. He spraying him and The Rock with the beer and everything, and attacking Vince McMahon in the hospital. Well, Austin just causing all kinds of chaos and making Vince McMahon's life miserable, filling his car with cement. And so Austin and McMahon, and of course, it's because Austin very rebellious, Vince McMahon, and meanwhile doesn't see Austin as fitting the corporate image. So, a very kind of simple story, but told very effectively, and it was very interesting and compelling, which is why people wanted to tune in for it week after week. But next up is The Undertaker vs. Mankind, continuing their feud, including that iconic match with iconic moments at King of the Ring 1998, the Hell in a Cell match, where Mankind took not one but two very scary falls. One from the top of the cell to the announce tables below. And then one through the top of the cell. Went into thumbtacks. Tooth went through his nose. It's probably a moment. It's arguably, I believe it is still like one of the most replayed moments of not just the Attitude Era, but in all of WWE history. Moments that really defined, especially Mankind, Mick Foley, and death was a crazy moment. A moment where Foley almost died. Apparently Foley, they thought he was dead at one point. Terry Funk thought he was dead. Vince McMahon thought he was dead. Even Undertaker himself thought he was dead. Throughout the course of the match, and apparently in the spot where Mankind went through the top of the cell, apparently Mick Foley landed wrong, but if he had landed correctly the way he was supposed to, he could have died. It's still one of the craziest moments, one of the craziest matches. I reviewed it last year on the channel, so go check out that review. And really, no amount of words will really do the match justice. But check out the review anyway. But next up here, we have Mike Tyson. So Mike Tyson is brought in to WWF, which makes sense. A celebrity involvement had paid off for WWF in the past, but also because Mike Tyson and the baddest man on the planet, adding that roughness and some of that legitimacy to WWE/WF in its Attitude Era state. It is the kind of special guest enforcer for Austin versus Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 14. Which, spoiler alert, that's going to be the match that we're going to be talking about to tie in with 1998 here in the Monday Night Wars analysis. But Mike Tyson at first signing with D-Generation X in the moment where Shawn confronting Mike Tyson grabs that shirt, pulls it off, reveals the DX shirt, but also Mike Tyson coming in after the ref was taken out at the aforementioned WrestleMania match, fast counting, giving Austin the win, and then turning on Shawn Michaels and knocking Shawn Michaels out. And speaking of which, next up is the D-Generation X Army. So that match at WrestleMania 14 was the final match for Shawn Michaels for 4 years. This was when he went to his first retirement, and after injuring his back in the casket match at the Royal Rumble against the Undertaker. So, Shawn Michaels was Shawn Michaels was out of commission for the time being. Speaking of commission, he would become a commissioner in WF, but Shawn Michaels is no longer active. So that just left Triple H all by his lonesome. So he recruited other members of D-Generation X. He already had China, but he then recruited the New Age Outlaws, that being the Road Dogg, Jesse James, and the Badass, as later Mr. Ass, and then later Daddy Ass, Billy Gunn. And so they were recruited. X-Pac was recruited as well, having come off a stint as 6 in WCW as part of the NWO and everything. It's crazy that 6, X-Pac, Sean Ullman, 123 Kid, what have you, was part of probably the two biggest factions within the Monday Night War. That is definitely crazy to think about. So they formed the D-Generation X Army. excuse me, and were up to their normal shenanigans, including them pulling up in a very iconic moment, pulling up to WCW, who I believe their headquarters. I believe it directly was their headquarters. With the tank, in the full army guard, or knocking on the door, or just really firing a major shot within the Monday Night Wars. But speaking of which, let's see what's going on in WCW at the time. So, the first one here that I have for WCW is Hulk Hogan and Dennis Rodman / Hollywood Hogan and Dennis Rodman going against DDP, Diamond Dallas Page, and Karl Malone, the Mailman. So, wrestling crossed over with basketball. So, Dennis Rodman was friends with Hogan, and had been associated with Hogan within WCW. So, of course, when Hogan turned heel, Dennis Rodman also joined up with the NWO and everything. Meanwhile, I guess DDP and Karl Malone had some type of friendship that led to Karl Malone being brought in, they built towards and faced off at Bash at the Beach 1998, and the stars aligned in just a way, and it does happen sometimes with storylines where there's some storylines you build artificially, you build within kayfabe and everything, but then sometimes real life steps in, and real life sometimes can hamper a storyline, but it can also enhance, because as the the two teams facing in the NBA Finals that year happened to be the Chicago Bulls and the Washington Wizards. So, you had Karl Malone and Dennis Rodman going head to head on the court, or her doing some promos and everything on TV as well, and then them facing off in the ring. And this was also the Last Dance, Michael Jordan's final NBA season. So, just everything coming together. Heather, too bad the match couldn't live up to the hype, though. Oh yeah, very not great match. Unfortunately, it's a match that I definitely want to review on the channel. It's definitely been on my radar, but that's for another time. And it's definitely gonna be an awful month. I'll definitely tell you that. But yeah, but speaking of which, Trouble in Paradise for the NWO, as the NWO would implode. This had been brewing for a while. Even back then, seeing some early signs as Randy Savage, Macho Man Randy Savage, kind of going against Hogan and everything here. But eventually, Hogan would have his issues with Kevin Nash, and ultimately the NWO split up, forming NWO Black and White / NWO Hollywood, and then NWO Wolfpack. Wolfpack included guys like Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Sting, Conan, and as well. And then NWO Black and White guys like Hogan and Kurt Hennig, or I believe Kurt Hennig was part of the Black and White / Wolfpack. So, kind of playing up with the NWO's parents essentially fighting, but they would be united again, and again, I mentioned these are noble storylines. Doesn't necessarily mean good. Like, if anything, this was probably a very damning indictment of just how big the NWO had grown. Perhaps a little too big. It got to the point where they had to splinter off into separate factions. But if you can believe it, it's going to get a whole lot crazier with the NWO. But then next up is the Flock. So Raven jumped ship from ECW to WCW over lack of pay, which is very synonymous with WCW. But not WCW, ECW. But Raven making the jump from ECW to WCW and getting his own stable in the Flock, including members such as Chris Kanyon, Perry Saturn, Billy Kidman, and Sick Boy, and obviously Raven himself, kind of hanging out around ringside areas during the shows and everything, and just overall wreaking havoc. But eventually, the Flock would dissolve. By November, Perry Saturn ultimately won the Freedom, and the Flock, ultimately would disband. And but But the next up I have is Chris Jericho versus Dean Malenko. So, dipping back into the cruiserweight. Chris Jericho. Oh, uh, oh, uh, having this feud with Dean Malenko. If Dean Malenko's the man with 1,000 holds, Chris Jericho's the man with 1,004 holds, including that famous moment where Chris Jericho came out with a big list of all the holds he knew, most of them being arm bars, of course. But Jericho and Malenko. Jericho had other feuds as well. That year, but Malenko was a very notable one, including Chris Jericho making fun of Dean's recently deceased recently deceased at the time, Boris Malenko. Him going at it, Jericho trying to find loopholes any way to hold on to the cruiserweight championship. So the cruiserweight division still getting that spotlight and that lot of love in WCW at the time. But next up is Scott Steiner. So, I reviewed this match a while back. If you haven't already, go check out the review. But at Super Brawl 8, Scott Steiner turned on his brother Rick and joined up with the NWO, and from there pretty much reinvented himself, getting a whole lot more mass, dyeing his hair blonde, coming out with the chainmail and the sirens and the freaks, becoming the big bad booty daddy, of course, and the rest from there is history, as Scott Steiner really going off on his own into his singles career, and Rick Steiner spending pretty much the rest of '98 trying to get back at Scott Steiner, trying to get at him in the ring, trying to get at his younger brother who turned on him. So, but this really began Scott Steiner's major main event push, and Scott Steiner would continue to be a major main eventer even later on into WCW's lifespan. And the last notable storyline that I have, and I'm sure there are several I missed. In fact, I know there is these are a lot of the ones that sprung to mind, and through some research. Are really of note. But the last one we have is Last Call Scott Hall. Pretty much, it's one thing to play off someone's substance abuse issues well after the fact and kind of bring up that history and whatnot. But it's another thing to bring up someone's history with substance abuse while they're still going through those issues of substance abuse. And when it came to Scott Hall, he definitely was going through that. And they played off it in storyline, including him appearing to be drunk as he would feud with Kevin Nash. Scott Hall and Kevin Nash were feuding at one point, and Scott Hall really distanced himself from Kevin Nash and the Wolfpack. And one of what a lot of people consider to be one of the most tasteless storylines in WCW history. And considering WCW's track record, that's definitely saying something. But very tasteless storyline to go through. Honestly, I feel like bringing that stuff up is pretty tasteless. Is anyway, but sometimes you get around it by having it be, oh no, we're only bringing it up because it's a redemption storyline. And make no mistake, WWF/WWE definitely no strangers to it either. In fact, around the same time, they were playing off of Hawk's substance abuse issues as well, that being Hawk of the Road Warriors, and of course, when it comes to Jeff Hardy and stuff like that. When it comes to Jeff Hardy and WWE, that's a well they like going to very often, and it was a lot of the crux of his feud with CM Punk and with Sheamus in around 2019-2020. It's something they definitely go to, but. It was especially tasteless within WCW. But for MVPs, he's for WF. We have Stone Cold Steve Austin, and really, all these guys: Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Mick Foley, D-Generation X, and the Corporation, all for the reasons I mentioned earlier. Really being the focal point of stories for the most part through 1998 in WWF. Meanwhile, in WCW, we have Diamond Dallas Page. He's continuing to do his thing as he continues his rise to the main event scene, including almost taking the title from Goldberg in the main events that hardly anybody got to see at Halloween Havoc 98. And speaking of which, Goldberg, as he continues his rise, and he would win the WCW World Heavyweight Championship from Hogan. Later in the year, we have the Cruiserweight division and in the Cruiserweight division on fire, or oftentimes outperforming the main event scene. We have Hang because has a cool or is Sting in and continuing to do his thing and everything, and the NWO kinda, because they were a big entity, but you can tell people were starting to get kind of sick of them, especially now that they split off into the two sides. Now people still liked the NWO for the most part, especially Wolfpack and everything, but yeah, kind of starting to overly balloon at this point. But nevertheless, that's going to do it for this episode of the Monday Night Wars. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please do me a favor: like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends, and turn on post notifications so you know every time I upload a video so you can see when it drops. And let me know in the comments below your thoughts on this episode. Oh, and yeah, things are heating up, especially on the WWF side. But how will things go as we move into the final year of the not just the 20th century, but the previous millennia? Let's find out. But nevertheless, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you guys later. Peace. All right, hello, citizens of the Nigelverse. It is Nige here once again, and this is gonna be another episode of the Monday Night Wars. So, if you remember from last week, in 1998, quite some stuff went down. WWE finally, slash WWF, finally fighting back in the ratings against WCW, who, as what was going on TV, The Rock became the corporate champion, became the crown jewel of the corporation. Mankind is out, The Rock is in, and of course Steve Austin's up to his normal shenanigans. And meanwhile, over in WCW, Kevin Nash is WCW World Champion after beating Goldberg in very controversial circumstances at Starrcade '98, sapping his undefeated streak. So Goldberg's undefeated streak has come to an end, and how will they fare as we party like it's 1999? And let's find out. Of course, as always, I have the ratings for both WWF Monday Night Raw and WCW Monday Nitro. And as well as the notes. And as you can see, it's quite a bit this time. And of course, I'm not gonna go week by week. I'm gonna point out some weeks, kind of some of the things that are going on, some of the trends that are starting to notice. I'm not gonna go week by week, but as you can see, I'll have the ratings and everything. If you want to see each individual rating, a lot of them will be on screen, and so definitely feel free to pause it at any point so you can see the ratings. If you want to pause it so you can see the ratings and see how they progress week to week, that is totally fine. And in fact, I will. In fact, if I remember, I will link where I found the ratings. It's courtesy of Pro Wrestling Fandom, as well as a couple other sites. So if you guys are interested, I will link the ratings so you can see all the ratings for the entire Monday Night War span. And but without further ado, let's see what's going down. We start off with the January 4th episode. Now, I just said I'm not going to go week by week, and I'm not. But this episode is worth mentioning because after this point, this is essentially the turning point. After this point, Monday Nitro never beats Raw in the ratings again. And this episode, a lot of people feel has something to do with it. So this is the episode that consisted of two two very different things. And kind of spoiler, it will be the subject of our match review for the week. Matches review, if you will, because there's definitely two sides to talk about. Over on Raw, Mankind finally won the WWF Championship from The Rock with some help from not just D-Generation X, but Stone Cold Steve Austin. And so Mankind finally grabbing the brass ring and winning the WWF Championship, which is awesome, and definitely shows like his reward for helping out the company so much to this point. But meanwhile, on Nitro, we got the Finger Poke of Doom, who in the main event for the WCW World Championship, Kevin Nash Ash defended the title against Hollywood Hulk Hogan, who had come back from his retirement, coming out of his presidential run on raise your hand if you forgot he had a presidential run around this time, but coming back from that and having a match against Kevin Nash here, but Hogan pokes Kevin Nash in the chest as Kevin Nash falls down. And Hogan pins him, becomes WCW World Champion, and pretty much uniting NWO Black and White and NWO Wolfpack, because of course Kevin Nash was the leader of NWO Wolfpack. So NWO becomes a huge conglomerate once again. Great! Hey, just what we needed. Even more NWO. Oh, the faction had already gotten so big and so overblown and so bloated, it now just getting even bigger. Now the two sides are uniting again. Now that mommy and daddy essentially got back together. Cool. Do you WCW? But yeah. So as you can tell from how I'm describing it, it went over like a lead balloon, unfortunately, and it's no wonder that with stuff like that going on, that Nitro couldn't be Raw in the ratings anymore. And we see the trend continuing in Raw, pulling 5s, 6s, 7s, and even 8s. Now they do fall to a 4.2 and 4.4 here on the August 30th and the September 6th episode. Oh, they do fall a little bit, but otherwise, is Raw managing to keep its head above water, or staying within the 5 and 6 territory, and having a high of having the 8.1, the high one, the highest one of the year, which I guess does make sense, because as you can see by the NA there, that week went uncontested from Nitro. So the May 10th episode went uncontested, but pulling 8, and it ends up giving Raw an average of 6.1 for the year, which is pretty good. Meanwhile, Nitro not doing too hot. We see they do get up to some 5. They don't go above a 6, but we see them a 4. They have a 3.9 here on the February 15th episode. They even dip down to a 2 points, so 2.9, 2.6 here on October 4th and October 11th. Those episodes. Then they end off not with a bang, but with a whimper with a 2.9. Granted, not as low as they would go, but still pretty low. So they end up on the December 27th episode, which is my friend's one of my friend's birthday. It gives Nitro an average of 3.7 for the year, which is really not good. It is really bad. At Nitro, we are approaching dire straits. We're not, if you can believe it, we're not quite in dire straits just yet for Nitro, but we're getting there. But what's going on more specifically in WF at the time? As I mentioned, Mankind wins the WF Championship, and I'm gonna expound upon it more in the Finger Poke of Doom. But it probably wouldn't have had such an impact had Tony Schiavone not decided to open his mouth and pretty much give that way. But like I said, I'll go over that more when we get to the review. So Mankind wins the WF Championship, doesn't hold it for long. He actually drops it back to The Rock at the Royal Rumble in that very classic match, in quotation marks, because of the severe brain trauma from all those chair shots from The Rock. And of course, it does get very uncomfortable, but Mankind will win it back at halftime heat. But The Rock will win it back from him there, and of course, it'll be Rock versus Austin at WrestleMania 15. Yeah, so Mankind and The Rock continuing their feud, and if you can believe it, kind of jumping ahead, yes, you see The Rock and Sock connection there. They would eventually team up. The Rock would turn face, kind of split from the corporation, and The Rock and Mankind would join up, form the Rock and Sock connection, and kind of entertaining duo there, including one of the highest rated Raw segments ever, or that being the "This Is Your Life" segment with Mankind kind of throwing the "This Is Your Life" celebration with The Rock, bringing up some like the people from The Rock's past, kind of a celebration for or The Rock. Something that, of course, because it was so successful, WWE tried and failed to redo multiple times. And ironically enough, one of the highest rated Raw segments, and it's also kind of indirectly led to one of the lowest rated Raw segments when Alexa Bliss just tried to do the same thing to Bayley, obviously more in a mocking way, but yeah, it was not fun at all. And I remember I watched the Bayley Alexa Bliss one live, and yeah, that was pretty rough. You could literally hear a pin drop in that arena for that segment when they tried to do it with Alexa Bliss and Bayley several years later. But nevertheless, hopefully Alexa Bliss is back soon. I think she is still on maternal leave because, of course, she had her child and everything. But hopefully she is coming back soon. But nevertheless, as next up we have the Ministry of Darkness / the Corporate Ministry. This is where things get a little bit weird. So the Undertaker at her, if you remember from last time, I'm Undertaker had turned heel, had joined up with Kane, Bros of Destruction, and everything, had been doing the bidding of the corporation, but eventually gets his own faction, starts his own faction within the Ministry of Darkness. His consisting of members like himself, the Brood for a little bit, the acolytes Farouk and Bradshaw, who would eventually split off from there, and including Viscera, the former Mabel. Putting Undertaker in the same group as Viscera, aka / Mabel, aka the man who broke the Undertaker's face, had to have been a sick rib of some kind. But nevertheless, and this one was when Mabel had came back, was rechristened Viscera, got like a goth makeover, and joined up with the Ministry of Darkness, and eventually they joined up with the corporation to form the Corporate Ministry, which if WCW couldn't get away with having too many people in their group, WF wasn't going to have a prayer either. But the Ministry of Darkness got up to quite a few things, including almost sacrificing Stephanie McMahon before Austin made the save, and eventually answering to their higher power, or Howard Power, as the Undertaker calls it. It's who is the higher power? It was him, Austin. It was Vince McMahon, which definitely was very head scratching, considering Vince McMahon was the main man that the Ministry of Darkness had feuded with. And so Mr. McMahon did spend quite a bit in 1999 feuding with the Ministry of Darkness, including the aforementioned Stephanie McMahon kidnapping. This is when she became an on-screen character. Props to Vince McMahon for getting both his kids on TV, but or maybe lack of props if you don't really like the McMahon kids, but nevertheless, spending a lot of 1999 feuding with and Vince McMahon kind of turning face-ish, but just to be revealed as the higher power for the Ministry of Darkness / the Corporate Ministry. He granted faced Vince McMahon and not always as interesting as heel Vince McMahon. And I'm mainly talking about the on-screen character. The real life Vince McMahon is something else, of course. But yeah, it was very weird. But speaking of Stephanie, let's talk about the storyline with her and Triple H. I know I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but the things did feel all over the place, at least sometimes within the Attitude Era. Sometimes a good way, sometimes a not so good way. Stephanie McMahon, when she first showed up on WTV, she was in a relationship with Test, and Shane and Test had a feud, Shane being, the kind of overprotective big brother, including leading up to the lover leaver match at SummerSlam, which Test would win. And true love prevailed. Test was going to marry Stephanie, and then Triple H showed up and revealed that while Stephanie was Out of it, and against her will, he got married to her through in a drive-by chapel in Vegas. And of course, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, so they were legally married. And of course, it was funny with Triple H doing like the hand motion, like the puppeteering with Stephanie, like "How are you doing?" stuff like that. But eventually, Stephanie sides with Triple H, and thus begins the McMahon-Helmsley regime, the McMahon-Helmsley era. Triple H joins the corporation, turns on D-Generation X, splits them up. So the McMahon-Helmsley regime is in full effect, and you can see, especially with this is when Triple H is really becoming a main eventer, or which you figured it was a matter of time after Shawn Michaels was out and Triple H was in DX and everything, Leader DX, when he would become like a major main event level heat so and this was it as he was transitioning really into the main event, and we see the beginning of the McMahon Helms regime, but we also see the beginning of another friendship as X-Pac and Kane kind of form a bond so there have been plenty of pro wrestling odd couples, if you will. Couples that are put together, or not like couple like romantic, but couple like tag team partners usually that are put together that have no business being put together, or such as R-Truth and Goldust, the Golden Truth, or like Hooker T and Goldust, or this wouldn't even be the last one for Kane, as he would then team up with like Daniel Bryan, Team Hell No, stuff like that. Excuse me. So, this one was heartwarming for a lot of people. X-Pac and Kane kind of teaming up, kind of forming a friendship, a bond. Kane saying his first words without the use of the device that allowed him to talk. His first words obviously being "suck it," but yeah. So X-Pac and Kane having that kind of bond until X-Pac eventually turns on Kane. And Tori, who was kind of Kane's girlfriend, then turns on him as well and kind of joins up with X-Pac. But definitely a feel-good story. But someone who didn't feel good was Stone Cold Steve Austin, and as he got run over, not by a reindeer, but by a car. At Survivor Series 1999, Steve Austin, who was supposed to be in the WWF Championship match, ended up being run down by a car, or at least in storyline. So Austin was run over by the car and taken out. In reality, he was taking time off for surgery. So after Survivor Series, he's pretty much gone for the rest of '99. So Austin is written up. Wouldn't be back for a little while, and they would do kind of a whodunit kind of angle. We'll get more into that as we transition into 2000. But yeah, so Austin is out for the time being. But I actually don't have it listed here, but Undertaker would also take some time off as well, and he had to get groin surgery. He had a groin tear, so he would be out for a little while as well. And when Undertaker comes back, he's gonna have a very different image, but we will get to that again when we get to 2000. And I mentioned the Rock and Sock connection. Chris Jericho, who was in WCW, as you saw, who was going through this jump ship over to the WWF, shows up, does the Millennium Man countdown and everything, and so far having his rookie year getting into it with guys like Road Dogg and eventually The Rock and everything. So Chris Jericho, being a part of the WWF, would be there pretty much for a while. He would take he would kind of be on and off again and take some time off, obviously for stuff like injuries, stuff like that, but also to tour with his band Fozzy and everything. But he would be there pretty much until around like 2019 or so, and then 2018, 2019, then would make his way over to AEW and be one of the big parts in the early years of AEW. including being the first AEW World Champion. But yeah, so Jericho making his way over. Kurt Angle, who thankfully wasn't fully deterred after what happened at ECW High Incident and in the moment involving the Sandman. Kurt Angle makes his way over to the WWF, becomes a WWF superstar, and has probably one of the best rookie years, winning the WWF Championship, being involved in high-profile storylines, including with the aforementioned Stephanie McMahon. So Kurt Angle brought in as a big deal. Brought in as an Olympic hero. Kind of starts off as a face act, but then eventually turns heel and everything. And so he's doing his thing. I mentioned The Rock vs. Mankind. In DX, as I mentioned, Triple H turns on X-Pac. The New Age Outlaws also turn each other and kind of split and everything. And Billy Gunn is, or actually, I don't think we're quite there yet. Never mind. But so DX does implode, and everybody kind of goes off and does their own thing for a little bit. Jeff Jarrett undergoes his image change and is Intercontinental Champion, but eventually he is out of the WWF later on in the year after her threatening no show. I believe it might have been Survivor Series. He's pretty much when he dropped the Intercontinental Championship to China, which we will get to. But Jeff Jarrett had eventually making his way over to WCW, and we'll obviously get to that. But China does make history, becoming the first, and I believe so far the only female to win the Intercontinental Championship, winning it from Jeff Jarrett in the, I believe it was in the Good Housekeeping match that they had, where China won the Intercontinental Championship. Then we have Sable going against Mark Mero, Wildcat Mark Mero. In storylines, Sable splits off from her husband Mark Mero. So he kind of like disowns her and everything, joins up with Jacqueline and everything. But Sable really goes on her own, becomes a big star in the WWF. And I know I'm kind of going through these quickly. I'm kind of blowing through these only because there is a lot of these. And I don't want this to be too long. But the APA forms, Farouk and Bradshaw, the Acolyte. They start the Acolyte Protection Agency, which is what the APA stands for, and becoming one of the best tag teams, one of the most legendary, one of the funniest tag teams. Pretty much being, in a way, kind of mercenary. He's pretty much offering protection for a price, of course, having their clubhouse with the door and everything. So APA forms, but we do end it on a tragic note, as at Over the Edge 1999, Owen Hart passes away after falling from about 50 feet, if I'm not mistaken, 50 feet from the crowd, hitting his head on the turnbuckle as he was making his entry, and so he does unfortunately pass away in that, and what happens there, and it has sparked a debate. Should WWF have continued the show after that? There are people on both sides of the fence, and admittedly it is very touchy. And there is a lot of arguments. There is some arguments for either side, but there definitely is a lot of arguments for WWF stopping the show. Especially with the people such as Jeff Jarrett, who was close with Owen Hart, being concerned for his friend's safety after the tragic fall and everything, and Jeff Jarrett, of course, wishing Owen Hart well. And Jeff Jarrett, I believe, was like the very next match after the match that was supposed to happen between Owen Hart and the Godfather for the Intercontinental Championship. So Owen Hart. Owen Hart passing away. Like I said, a lot of people feel the show shouldn't have continued, and honestly, I do agree. I do kind of see like the show going on for some people. Wrestling kind of takes their mind off it, but somebody died during the show. Like stopping the show there, I think would have been very well, it would have been a very humanitarian move, and really they definitely should have. But at the same time, a lot was going on, and things were happening so fast it was hard to really process everything. But definitely in hindsight, I think the show being stopped, like there would have been some people upset, but it definitely would have been understandable. But nevertheless, going into the WCW side, seeing what's going on there, I mentioned the finger poke of doom, but Vince Russo, who was the head writer for WF, and in a lot of ways responsible for a lot of success of the Attitude Era in the WF, makes his way over to WCW pretty much in the dead of night, while the rest of most of the rest of the company is overseas doing a European tour. He makes his way over to WCW, who and becomes the head writer for them, and even getting involved in different storylines of WCW to varying success. But yeah, so Vince Russo, sadly, not quite able to sprinkle the same magic for WCW as he was able to for the WWF. But Vince Russo make his way over. Bret Hart and Goldberg do feud for a good portion of the year, including when Goldberg attempted to spear Bret Hart, but Bret Hart had the metal guard on his midsection, which honestly, you probably Sami Zayn, if you're watching this, which you probably aren't, you probably would still be Intercontinental Champion if you had tried that against Braun Breaker. You might have stopped him. Who knows? But nevertheless, it does lead to the match at Starrcade 1999, where Bret Hart suffers the concussion that ultimately is one of the factors leading to him retiring, and of course Bret Hart's still very upset, very bitter about the situation, which it again is kind of understandable. As Goldberg essentially kind of cost Bret Hart's career here, but at the same time, it was an accident. It's not like Goldberg intended to do it, but yeah. So there is that. Then there's Booker T versus Harlem Heat. Nigel, you may be asking, wasn't Booker T a part of Harlem Heat? He was, but eventually, his brother Stevie turned on Booker T. He and essentially kicked him out of Harlem Heat. He formed Harlem Heat 2000 with Big T, aka the former Ahmed Johnson, and took the T from Booker's name. So Booker T was just Booker for a little bit. And I'm pretty sure at that point, Cody Rhodes was writing notes, as he would just be Cody for a little bit while he was in AEW because of the copyright and everything. But because Harlem Heat felt that they owned the right to own the trademark to the Harlem Heat and Booker T name, and I believe there was a match for it. They took the T and the Harlem Heat name, so Booker was kind of on his own as Booker T is really starting to be even more established as like a solo star. Or eventually Booker would fully transition into that like solo star, especially as like Stevie Ray retired and everything. So yeah, there's that. Then there's Jeff Jarrett, as I mentioned, and Jeff Jarrett hit definitely being pushed to the moon, having the rocket strapped to him when he got to WCW, declaring himself the chosen one, saying he had all the stroke in the company because he and Vince Russo were friends. And Vince Russo also wasn't an on-screen character for a little bit, like not like Vince Russo the person. For a time, he was known as the Powers That Be, and the Powers That Be essentially had Jeff Jarrett's back. So Jeff Jarrett getting a big push there. But then we have NWO Black and Silver / NWO 2000, which Bret Hart had because I know I mentioned this earlier in the video, but it bears repeating. More NWO is exactly what we need at this time. So there's that. Then there's Master P and the No Limit Soldier. So Master P kind of had a deal going on with WCW, who informs on stable the No Limit Soldiers. Some of the members included Conan and Rey Mysterio, who would break off and help form the Filthy Animals. But to counteract them, Kurt Hennig started his own group, the South Country Rednecks, if I'm not mistaken, was the group name. But The No Limit Soldiers did fail to kind of get over, especially because they acted. From what I was reading, they did act kind of heel it. It's like bullying the rednecks and everything, and it was kind of a rap versus country. Versus country kind of feud they had for a while. Which I do like rap, certain types of rap. For the most part, country I'm not really the biggest fan of, but yeah, a lot of people weren't really getting behind the No Limit Soldiers, and so it kind of ended up being a bit of a failed experiment. But nevertheless, as we move on, Ric Flair became an on-screen authority figure for WCW, and pretty much became drunk with power. And it's funny that he did the same thing when he got to WWE again in 2002. But Ric Flair he become an on-screen authority figure, and Roddy Piper even became an on-screen authority figure alongside him. But then we also are introduced to Ric Flair's son, David Flair, as he became a wrestler in WCW. And David Flair, we'll get into more of in the 2000s because quite a bit of stuff going on with him. But of all the kind of, I don't necessarily want to call them. I don't know if I necessarily want to call them nepo babies, but pretty much like the children of wrestlers, in a way, kind of nepo babies. Like pretty much the children of famous wrestlers, the second, third generation wrestlers, what have you, who kind of get pushes and everything. In a way, kind of nepo babies, but nevertheless, David Flair wasn't among the best, unfortunately. But that's how it is sometimes, especially living up to Ric Flair. That was some big shoes to fill. But then we get the Hardcore Invitational. If you thought people getting injured for real during the brawl for all the WF was bad, you ain't seen nothing yet. So at Bash the Beach 1999, and they held the Hardcore Invitational, which they had in a junkyard, which I guess is pretty symbolic when it comes to the match. And Finley ended up winning by escaping the junkyard. But imagine in very chaotic action, in quotation marks, and a lot of shoot injury led to a very, very bad time and a very, very bad match. But it's a match for another time and another awful month. You already know how this goes. And finally, there was 7. So Goldust / Dustin Rhodes had jumped ship from WF to WCW, but for the time he was 7, and it definitely got some controversy. Having film vignettes where you like stare into children's windows and it would be painted all in and have like all the black clothes and everything, including like the black hat and jacket and everything. And yeah, it caused some it caused some concern among parents for what was putting on their TV. But it caused concern among wrestling fans because it sucked. But Dustin Rhodes showed up the first night he's 7. He cuts a work shoot promo, pretty much talking about, "Oh, take a look at this crap I'm in," pretty much running down the character, her and stuff like that, and being upset at how his father Dusty Rhodes was treated in WCW. So pretty much burying the character, and from there he would just be Dustin Rhodes again. So I guess the point came across us, but Dustin Rhodes, funnily enough, would be called the American Nightmare, Dustin Rhodes. So I wonder how the conversation went when Cody said, when Cody pretty much went up to Dustin and said, "Dad said it's my turn with the nickname." I believe Dustin had like a kind of like giving Cody. I believe he gave Cody his blessing to use the American Nightmare nickname, though. But as for the MVPs for both companies, he's for WF. If I put Stone Cold Steve Austin, because Stone Cold getting up to his shenanigans, including being CEO of WF for a time in kayfabe, were pretty much causing hell all around the office. Triple H, we see him ascending to the main event. The Rock and Mankind having their rivalry in their partnership. The Undertaker, kinda, because he is in the Ministry of Darkness, but the Ministry of Darkness was kinda wonky, especially when it involved into the corporate ministry. Then Shane McMahon, and this one, Shane McMahon really became very integral with the with the storylines and everything. And of course, Shane McMahon would go on to do Shane McMahon things in WWE. And Kurt Angle, well, of course, like I mentioned, having one of the best rookie years in WWE. And the MVPs for WCW, who and admittedly, kind of at this time, a bit few and far between, somewhat. But we have Jeff Jarrett, kind of because he is getting a push, but people, but some people feel it wasn't quite as earned as it could have slash should have slash they hoped it would be. Bret Hart continuing to do his thing. Ric Flair as kind of the on-screen authority figure. DDP this year. DDP finally won the WCW World Championship, and I believe he won it at Spring Stampede, if I'm not mistaken. But DP, a guy a lot of people felt definitely deserved and definitely had earned it, and so a lot of people were happy when he won. And Booker T really evolving into the solo star. So, excuse me, that is 1999 for the Monday Night War, or as WCW's on the back pedal, but they're not going quietly as we move into 2000. But I will say for 2000, if you thought WCW was in a bad spot now, you ain't seen nothing yet. But nevertheless, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please do me a favor: like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends, and turn on post notifications so you know every time I upload videos. You can see as it drops. And leave a like so I don't flub like that again. But let me know in the comments what your thoughts on this episode and your reaction to it so far. And are you enjoying my analysis of the Monday Night Wars thus far? But nevertheless, thank you all so much for watching. I will see you guys later. Peace. Alright. Hello, citizens of the Nigelverse. It's Night here once again, and this is the finale of the Monday Night Wars. So, right off the bat, you may notice I have my new camera, I have my new mic. Admittedly, not as good as I would have liked them to be. For starters, my camera is zoomed out quite a bit, so I did have to kind of update the background a little bit. Had to move some things around. You know how it is, but try to bear with me. And of course, with my mic, yes, as that's not your phone or device, however you're watching this on, that is my mic that's kind of making the echo. I've tried fiddling around with it. I tried like messing with it, and it's funny because when I first plugged it in to test it out, it was fine when I opened it. Like, it was fine, no echo or anything like that. But then as I further tried testing it, then that's when it came up unfortunately. So I'm trying to kind of contend with that. I kind of reached a compromise where I kind of turned it down so that it wouldn't like pick up a lot of feedback, but it does still have kind of that echo, unfortunately. So, I do apologize for that. So please definitely do bear with me. But we have quite a bit to do this week. We have this. I'm gonna try to get caught up on all the events from WWE and AEW and NXT, starting from Money in the Bank and on. So tomorrow I'm planning on doing Money in the Bank and Heat Wave. NXT Heat Wave. Wednesday is going to be SummerSlam and All In. Thursday is going to be Tales from the Labyrinth, as per usual. That's coming back because I've taken way too many off weeks when it comes to that. Friday is going to be Bash in Berlin and NXT No Mercy. And then Saturday is going to be a few things. It's going to be System Shock Radio, and it's going to be my predictions for All Out later on the night. But Saturday is also my birthday, so I have a very special review coming out. And then kind of go from there. I don't know if I'm going to do, because if you remember last year on the channel, I kind of dedicated the whole month of September to kind of like childhood month, kind of like whole birthday month celebration. I don't know if I'm gonna necessarily do that this year, but I'll probably do some sprinkles of it every now and then throughout the month of September. But otherwise, I don't know if I'm gonna fully dedicate it to full birth month celebration like I did the previous year. So now that is out of the way, hey, let's get into the Monday Night Wars. Let's get into what we came here for. If you remember last year, technically last year, that being 1999 as we move into 2000, but last time on the Monday Night Wars. Whereas last time we had the kind of Waterloo moment, as it were, for WCW, where they gave away the finish to Mankind vs. The Rock, happening on the January 4th episode of Raw, and kind of spoiled that Mankind would be winning the WWE Championship. Hip saying, that would put the butts in the seats, and it definitely did, because as it apparently turned the tide, a lot of people switched over from Nitro to Raw, and those who stuck with WCW Monday Nitro, their reward for being loyal to the programming was the finger poke of doom. Meanwhile, those who switched over got to see Mankind win the WWF Championship for the first time. Finally, get his moment in the sun. And so, Nitro had never beaten Raw in the ratings again. So, because of that, and because of some of the other stuff we're going to get into, the Monday Night War, in a way, at this point in time where we are, or in terms of like 2000, 2001, admittedly, the war at this point is kind of a foregone conclusion. It's pretty much a formality. It's pretty much a mercy blow. To put into perspective for those who play Mortal Kombat, we've passed the actual battle part. Now we're just waiting on the fatality, and we're definitely gonna get to that, because 2000 and 2001, whoo boy, at the very least for WCW, to quote the legendary Anakin Skywalker, this, ladies and gentlemen, is where the fun begins. So, of course, we're going to start off with the ratings, and then we're going to move into our notes as per usual. But the notes is where things get really fun and really interesting, both for good and for bad. Without further ado, let's get right into it. If you've seen these before, if you haven't, definitely check out the rest of my Monday Night Wars analysis. I might do like a compilation style video where I like put them all together, and that way you're able to watch them all and watch it pretty much from beginning to end. So I might do that if I remember to. But also. If you've seen these before, you kind of already know how we're doing it. But if you haven't, pretty much, I'm not gonna go week by week and talk about the ratings from each and every week. But I am going to mention some trends, some things that we're seeing, in some evolutions, some de-evolutions, and so we're gonna go from there. As you can see, there are a couple weeks that went uncontested. We have the July 17th episode of Monday Nitro that didn't occur, then, and same with December 11th and Christmas, December 25th, and you may notice kind of a different format for these ratings. You're like, Nigel, did you just change the format? Did you feel like, were you messing around? Were you pulling a rib on us? Were you change the format from this to this? No, I actually had to find a different site, because the site I used, that being the fandom for the Monday Night Wars, that showed the ratings, unfortunately stopped after 2000. And granted, that was kind of, they probably did that as a mercy kill kind of thing, but you need the full ratings. You want to at least give WCW a bit of fighting chance. So I had to outsource it to a different website, and that website actually showed all the ratings for as well as for like Thunder and SmackDown and everything. Which SmackDown and Thunder I haven't even mentioned. SmackDown was introduced. It was in 1999. Pretty much kind of like a continuation, kind of like secondary kind of B show in a way for WWE, so that things kind of carry over from there. Kind of similar to how AEW kind of does Rampage or even Collision in nowadays. It wouldn't really become its own brand until the brand splits. Actually, the following year in 2002. But for now, it's kind of a second mini Raw in a way. Almost kind of like Heat, but not really. And then Thunder was also kind of the same thing. Now Thunder kind of was a lot more in line with like AEW Rampage. I even showed those ratings, but I declined to bring them up because it's the Monday Night Wars. We're concerned about the Monday shows, that being Raw and Nitro. Oh, so oh, we have the uncontested weeks. But now let's see some of the trends. So, Raw is doing sixes. Like they start off hot in the beginning of the year up until the February 14th episode, Valentine's Day, if you will, where they drop down to a 4.4, but immediately pick it back up to a 5.9 the following week. They continue going high, even getting a 7.1. Even getting a 7.1 on the May 22nd episode. Staying within the 5 and 6 range. They do dip down again to the 4s, or it's around on August 28th and September 4th, otherwise staying with the 5, 6s is and stuff like that. They do dip down to a 3.8 on the Christmas episode. I imagine that might be the case because people are spending time with their families, and so you want to spend time with your family, whether it be your parents, your grandparents, your uncles, your aunts, and maybe not crowd around the TV. At least that's kind of just a theory on my part, or it's a game theory, if you will. But I don't know for sure, so don't quote me on that. But moving in to 2001, we see mostly the same up until I do like how it shows going into the weeks, how it's got the January 1st to 4th, then January 7th to the 11th, then 14th, 18th, 21 to 25, stuff like that. So we see those ratings there, and I noticed that we forgot the averages, so we're gonna do it live. But first, let's see what Nitro's doing. So Nitro not faring as well as Raw. So Nitro's got the 3s. He's got the 2 who's dipping down to even a 1.8 on the April 3rd episode. But that, of course, will have a significance, at least the following week's episode. So staying within the 2s and the 3s, they do not go they don't go up to the 4 at all. They are mainly flying under the radar, hovering around the 3 to around like the 3, and so the 3 range. Don't go up to 4, or they only dip down to 1. The one that 1.88 here. They only dip down once, which admittedly for WCW at this time is kind of impressive. But yeah, so otherwise staying very, very low. Raw's average here, we're going to calculate it live, and you can see kind of the formula that I'm using for it. And I do notice a significant echo. The mic doesn't like me getting so close, unfortunately. But nevertheless, so we have the Raw average, and pretty much how I calculated it is I do the formula and kind of like a sort of Excel or equivalent tutorial. Well, you take the average, you just type in average, and then you can drag down. And thankfully, it did it for me. We'll see if we do it for the other ones, so you can see. So we'll take the average. We can tap over and calculate that. So we see. I just had it. So average. I see what's going on. Okay, so take the average, and we can take that average, and we see that, and then we can move it over. We can decrease the decimal places, and we'll decrease it there. So Raw has about an average of a 5.7 for 2000 and for 2001. And the reason that I combined 2000 and 2001, the same reason why I combined 1995 to 1996, is because 2001, similar to 1995, wasn't the full year for Nitro, and you're gonna find out why. We take the average there, and then again, let's see what Nitro's average is. So you take the average, and then You can type them in, or you can just drag it, and thankfully it takes out automatically for like the NAs and stuff like that. And so you can take that average, put that there, hit the enter, and not as good an average. So if we decrease the decimal places like so, we see that Nitro manages an average of about 2.6, which is really, really not great, unfortunately. Yeah, but he so Raw absolutely demolishes. Like I said, kind of for on conclusion, and Raw absolutely annihilating Nitro in the ratings. But now let's get to the notes. Let's see what's happening here in WF and in WCW. But it is worth mentioning, I think, something I forgot to mention actually during the 1999 segment, in terms of notable people slash storylines in WF. Admittedly, I probably forgot quite a bit, but how could I forget the Brood? The Brood that I was being Edge and Christian and Gangrel. Edge started off kind of like a loner, kind of on the street and everything, and kind of implied he was homeless, is attacking random people, pretty much a tortured soul, and he would enter through the crowd. Eventually, Christian joined up with him, and for a while they were billed as like brothers, like they were treated pretty much like brothers, which they looked alike. This is before we got like short hair Christian and short hair Edge. I think about it, but this is when they had like the long flowing movie star looks with the long flowing blonde hair, almost akin to like Thor. So they were or so they were paired together, or they teamed up with Gangrel as the Brood. Eventually, they dumped Gangrel, and Gangrel adopted the Hardys, and they became the new Brood. And then eventually, they dumped Gangrel as well. The Hardys started off being managed by Doc Hendricks, aka Michael Hayes. They were managed by him for a little bit. They won the services of Terry Runnels via the Terry Runnels Invitational, I believe, at No Mercy 1999. So they were managed by her for a little bit, and so yeah. But we see how the tag team division kind of forms. But yeah, so I just had to bring that up, and we will kind of revisit it. But I can't believe I forgot. At least I think I forgot to bring it up during my look at 1999 for WF. If I did bring it up, then totally disregard this whole point of the video. But yeah. So we're now getting into some other stuff that's going on. For starters, in 2000, we have two returns, and similar to combining the ratings for 2001, we're kind of combining a lot of the storylines for 2000 2001. For starters, Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Undertaker returned, both returning pretty soon after WrestleMania. Unfortunately, because both were out, Austin needed neck surgery. The Undertaker had a groin tear. They were out. They missed WrestleMania and everything, and it definitely showed with WrestleMania 2000 not being looked on too fondly. But they both came back, and how they wrote Steve Austin off in storyline was that he got ran over, or so it was pretty much like a whodunit kind of thing, and trying to figure out who ran over Steve Austin, and even some eyes point to the Undertaker, but eventually it was revealed to be Rikishi, which a lot of people, it caused a lot of people to scratch their heads, like Rikishi, very fun loving, was part of Too Cool and everything, which Too Cool, how did I forget Too Cool here in my notes as well? One of the most overact, including having that legendary moment in Madison Square Garden where all three of them were in the Royal Rumble at the same time, and they took a little mini dance break. But Rikishi was revealed to be the one who ran over Austin, which a lot of people were like, Rikishi, this guy who is known as being very fun loving and very for the people and everything. And Rikishi, of course, infamously did it for The Rock, because The Rock was feuding with Austin, so kind of trying to throw The Rock under the bus. But it turns out Triple H was the mastermind behind it after all, which a lot of people feel like was kind of kind of the was kind of the end goal, was that Triple H was going to be the one responsible. Well, but ultimately they decided to try to swerve us, and it didn't really work. So Austin and Triple H kind of had their feud, including Triple H being almost killed by Austin in a forklift in the car at Survivor Series 2000. But next up is the Radicals. So Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, Perry Saturn, and Dean Malenko, from WCW, all relatively big parts of WCW, jump ship from WCW to WWF. After they were in the crowd and everything, and eventually made their way to WWF programming, were aligned with Triple H for a little bit before going off and kind of doing their own thing, and they did try to get them to stay, including them popping the WCW World Championship on Chris Benoit, but yeah, it didn't work, and they made their way over and would go on to be part of WWF programming, and all of them would kind of have some careers in WWF. More so with Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit. Eddie actually was fired for a time. In part due to his substance abuse issues and everything. And eventually, he overcame them and came back, and the rest is history for him. But then next up, as I was mentioning earlier, there is the tag team situation, and as the Hardys, the Dudleys, and Edge and Christian pretty much made tag team wrestling cool for a little while, including the awesome matches, not just at WrestleMania 2000 and the ladders match at WrestleMania 2000, not just the first ever TLC match at SummerSlam 2000, but then the TLC rematch at WrestleMania 17, aka WrestleMania X7. All matches that are awesome, all matches I recommend, and all matches I actually reviewed on the channel. So if you haven't already, go check out those reviews. But yeah, just phenomenal stuff they were doing. Of course, the Dudleys coming over from ECW, who now the Dudleys, he's unfortunately kind of got some secondhand heat because they came in after what happened with Public Enemy. So Public Enemy came in to WWF. A lot of people were still mad at them because they first signed with WCW, but they eventually left. So a lot of people felt like they were betrayed by them, and eventually they made their way over to the WWF, but by then they had a lot of heat, and it led to the APA pretty much being sent in to stiff them and to pretty much make them pay for their transgressions, and pretty much drove them out of WWF, and that's exactly what happened. So the Dudleys overcame and persevered and went on to have their career in WWF. But then next up is the return of Cactus Jack. Yes, as Mankind No More, Mick Foley brought back the Cactus Jack persona, and he feuded with Triple H for a little bit. Including at both Royal Rumble and No Way Out in 2000. So. Cactus Jack returned there, and from there, Mick Foley became Commissioner Foley. This was back when they had commissionership, which is kind of like today's equivalent of what they do in the general manager with Adam Pearce or Nick Aldis and everything. But Commissioner Foley, he very very wacky but very beloved fun character. Was Commissioner Foley. And some of the high jinks he got up to. Then there was the Hardcore Championship, and more specifically when Crash Holly held it. So with the Hardcore Championship, pretty much like back then's version of the 24/7 Championship that WWE did a little while ago. Which about 5 years ago. It's crazy. It was 5 years ago, but. But yeah, so especially with Crash Holly. Crash Holly is actually the one who introduced the 24/7 rule. Now, the Hardcore Championship wasn't always 24/7 like what they did with the 24/7 Championship. It was defended in actual matches, stuff like that. He even made 1 or 2 WrestleManias. But with Crash Holly, he did, the 24/7 rule where he defended it anytime and anywhere. Yeah, and it definitely took a toll on poor Crash Holly to the point where he couldn't sleep because he had to defend it so much. And eventually, the Hardcore Championship kind of phased out, but that was a fun storyline, including Crash Holly defending it at a friggin' a freaking ball pit at Funland, USA. Hey, but then there's Right to Censor, which kind of a kind of a I don't know if I'll full on use polarizing, but I know a lot of people will kind of liked or dug kind of the idea of Right to Censor, or or um, and others kind of really didn't. The one thing I definitely didn't dig was their freaking theme song because it was pretty much just like sirens, and not like the cool Scott Steiner sirens. I'm talking about like the annoying, very annoying, hurt your ear sirens. But pretty much, pretty much W's answer to like the PTC, FTC, organizations like that, pretty much telling WWE to like WF at the time to tone down stuff, of which WF kind of did, but they definitely did it under duress, and they made fun of it with Right to Censor, that being this very like super conservative group consisting of like Steven Richards, not Stevie Richards, Steven Richards. They made his name very proper to fit the gimmick. So it was Steven Richards, it was Val Venus, it was it was Godfather. It was the Godfather who was renamed the Good Father. It was Bull Buchanan, and it was Ivory. Now, especially with Val Venus and the Godfather, there gimmicks. Essentially, essentially being part of like the joke, where their gimmicks consist of a former adult star and a former pimp, essentially. But they had their thing going on for a little while, and they were a big part of WTV for like a while. And were actually a pretty big faction for a little bit. I'm not talking about big like they kept expanding like NWO or something like that, but yeah. And then finally there was DX 2000, and kind of the reunion of D Generation X that lasted for a little while. But now moving into WCW side of things, this is where the fun begins, because WCW, for all intents and purposes, was a sinking ship. Probably was not going to turn things around. Probably was on its last legs, and its like last breath and everything, its last gasp when it comes to trying to hold on and maintain. But you know what? They may have been going out, but they were not going out without a fight. Hey, they were gonna go, but they weren't gonna go quietly. Yeah, so we start off first with the big championship reset on April 10th of 2000. WCW stripped everyone of their titles. Yes, so Eric Bischoff was brought back in and on TV in a position of power for the first time in a while. Essentially, he trying to reboot WCW. Wouldn't be the last time they would at least attempt to reboot WCW, but yeah. So they were, so they decided that they would strip everyone of the championships, and we would have new tournaments and everything to crown all new champions. Now, if you wanted to reboot it, surely there was an easier way to do so instead of having to strip every one of their titles. To give kind of a comparison, when NXT became NXT 2.0, they didn't strip everybody of their titles. Everybody who was already champion and held on to their championships. It's just that over time they would slowly start to put them more on like the 2.0 talents, with some exceptions. But nevertheless, that's the next thing we have is the New Blood versus the Millionaires Club. Now, the New Blood was a heel stable. Made up of a lot of the younger, newer talent in WCW, such as like the natural born thrillers of like like Sean Stasiak, Sean O'Hare, stuff like that, and pretty much these guys who are going to revolutionize pretty much, essentially kind of like the new breed that they would do for like ECW, like the WWE version of ECW. Then and there was a Millionaires Club who was made of more like the legends and veterans, and names like Lex Luger and Diamond Dallas Page, stuff like that. At taking on the newer, young, cocky, brash, arrogant, and not necessarily children, but younger guys. You get the idea, pretty much. They were having their feud, and that definitely did dominate a lot of the storylines for a while, especially in 2000. Then there was this. It's the thing that a lot of people associate with this period in WCW, and one of the things that a lot of people feel was the downfall of WCW, among other things, was their reliance on insider terminology. Now, oh, uh, for the kind of wrestling insiders, those who are more so in the know within the business, more like the hardcore wrestling fan, and you probably know a lot of these terms. I just used one earlier. I used the term rib. About but it's more so used within the bag among the boys, stuff like face, heel, well, face, heel, rib, work, shoot, stuff like that. All these insider terms and hers, but they brought it over to the outsiders and tried to use it to the wrestling fans and tuning in and trying to use all these insider terms and trying way too hard to blur the lines between fiction and reality. Kayfabe and reality, to the point where, and kayfabe is kind of another insider term, but pretty much to the point where nobody knew what the hell was going on. Nobody knew what was for real, what was in storyline, what was real, stuff like that, and it got super confusing. Now, the thing is, it's happened before. Like, I've seen it before. Obviously, CM Punk had his work shoot promo. He's had a couple actually. But he had his work shoot promo. We've had work shoot promos before from guys like Paul Heyman, Joey Styles, stuff like that. And sometimes they'll do little nods to it being all work and stuff like that, and like making references to like other gimmicks and other wrestlers, stuff like that, and kind of peel back the curtain a little bit. But the thing is, it's done in moderation. It's not something they do every single week. Imagine, and that's done every single week to where they try way too hard to go overboard of, oh, what's a shoot, oh, what's a work, oh, what's real, what's fake, stuff like that. Like, again, it can be interesting if done correctly, and oftentimes they will inject real life feelings into storylines to give it that extra oomph. They kind of did it with like McIntyre and Punk, or like Punk and Rollins, stuff like that. But WCW pretty much went super overboard with it, to the point where it got annoying, and to the point where it turned a lot of people away. Again, I can kind of see, like, it does to an extent drum up interest. Like, you can see people wanting to tune in to see whether things will blow and stuff like that. But when you're doing it every week and it's done in like the most the dumbest ways possible, it turns a lot of people away, unfortunately. But next up, we have a big one, and it's one we're going to get into in our review for this segment of the Monday Night Wars, and that one being the Bash at the Beach 2000 situation, which that's gonna be a fun one. Hulk Hogan has left WCW. So Hogan leaves WCW. He was in the New Blood Millionaires Club storyline, and again, I can't get too much into it because, as I want to save it for that, it really goes down in Bash at the Beach. But yeah, Hogan eventually leaves WCW, and Scott Hall also is out of WCW at one point. Like Goldberg, which I forgot to mention, Goldberg had turned heel. Why? But Goldberg had turned heel and pretty much helped force out Scott Hall. So like 2/3 of the end of like the original three of the NWO, aka one of like the big things that did a lot of great business for WCW, who we're out essentially. Granted, that was then. This is now, and the NWO had kind of run its course and run it into the ground. But it's still crazy how they were out. But obviously, we'll get more into that when we get into our review of Bash to the Beach. But next up is the big one, that being David Arquette winning the WCW World Championship. Now, to kind of give you a peer into my brain, I did think about reviewing Ready to Rumble, for the Monday Night Wars, but unfortunately, with all the delays and stuff like that, had me wanting to get this out so that it's not delayed even more. Unfortunately, it had to be cut due to time constraints, so it has to be left on the cutting room floor. But maybe I'll review it. Maybe I'll review it for like off a month or something down the line. But yeah, so David Arquette, the actor, won the WCW World Championship, which is still surreal how and why this was done. It was essentially done to promote the movie, but it was done way after the movie came out, and it really, really hurt. And the WCW World Championship, the World Heavyweight Championship, was essentially treated as a joke. And it really devalued it. It really devalued the company. David Arquette. It wasn't David Arquette's idea to put the title on himself. He said he didn't want to do it in retrospect, but yeah, it was a really bad idea. Now David Arquette kind of worked in reverse, where he did eventually work like the indie circuit and everything. I think he still wrestles on the indies. He's if I'm not mistaken, and he might be retired now, but I think he does still wrestle on the indies from time to time. But he did kind of give back, which is nice, and the proceeds from him winning the world championship he donated to the families of Owen Hart, so that was really good. But like, yeah, it was a really bad idea in hindsight. Like, imagine if they did that in today's WWE. Like imagine if they popped the WWE Championship, the top prize on say like Machine Gun Kelly or Jelly Roll. Well, now if they popped it on Logan Paul, like at least Logan's kind of now been in the business for a little bit, but it still wouldn't be the best idea. At least not where he's at currently. He's still, if he's gonna stick with WWE and actually like still fully commit to it, then maybe I can see it. But like, if I'm talking about a total outsider just brought in for promo, you pop the top prize on him. And now, granted, he wasn't world champion for long, but yeah, it was really bad. Like, hey, if you want to pop a title on David Arquette, I'm not sure why, but if you want to pop any title on him, maybe go for like the Hardcore Championship, because that's more of a, yeah, WCW had its own Hardcore Championship, and we're obviously going to get to that, as you can see further down in the notes. But maybe pop like the Hardcore Championship, maybe the U.S. Championship, maybe like the Tag Team Championship, so he doesn't have to do the work and stuff up as well. Like, at least with Logan Paul, they popped the United States Championship on him, and when celebrities have won championships in WWE, it's been like a joke. Tyler doesn't really mean much, like the 24/7 championship. But its top prize is the WCW World Championship on David Arquette. Really helped do WCW in, and really was just yet another black eye in a sea of black eyes for WCW. But speaking of which, next up we go into Norman Smiley as Hardcore Champion, and Screaming Norman Smiley, who became kind of Hardcore Champion, kind of became like a 1B Hardcore legend, and dressed up in like hockey pads and stuff like that, and like hockey jerseys and stuff like that, or like football jerseys, pretty much in a way to protect himself, kind of like hanging onto the Hardcore title by hook or by crook. Look, pretty much transitioning into the Hardcore section within WCW, the Hardcore Championship division, I meant to say. But that was a pretty fun gimmick that a lot of people liked. But next up, we have the debuts of Mike Awesome and Lance Storm, two guys from ECW, and they went in totally different directions. Lance Storm came in and was almost immediately treated like a star, or like an absolute stud in WCW. You got his own faction. You got Team Canada, which Mike Awesome ironically would be a part of. Of you guys' own faction, he won like the U.S. title, won like a bunch of titles. Pretty much was treated like a big deal in WCW. Who and had a he didn't win the world title, but that probably would have been next if things weren't so topsy turvy. But Lance Storm definitely got a monster push. Mike Awesome, on the other hand, and not so much. And it's crazy because Mike Awesome is definitely, aside from like promos and everything, but that's what managers are for. Or Mike Awesome definitely had all the tools to be like a top guy and a top name, and almost I'd go as far. I know a lot of people won't. I'd go as far as to put the world championship on him because he did come in as world champion in WCW. So Mike Awesome was ECW champion coming in, but got a apparently got a very big lucrative offer to join WCW, and so he did, and he was frustrated with not being paid by ECW, which ECW and talent being paid goes together pretty much like peanut butter and jelly. But Mike Awesome eventually made his way over while still ECW champion, and that caused a whole debacle. Well, and eventually he had to drop it to Taz, which gave us that piece of history, which I also reviewed on the channel, where a WCW wrestler faced a WWF wrestler for the ECW championship in a ECW ring, and it definitely was very surreal. But yeah, Mike Awesome, they saddled him with some very lame gimmicks and made him almost like a total loser. They saddled him with like the fat chick thrower, which, I mean, hey, look, nothing against the big curvy women. In fact, if any of them are watching, hit my line. But at that point, it definitely was more of like a comedy demoralizing gimmick for Mike Awesome, and then he became that 70s guy, Mike Awesome, because that 70s show was a thing around there, and so he became that 70s guy, Mike Awesome. Both very dumb, very cringy, very corny gimmicks. And then he joined Team Canada, like, hey, he turned heel, joined Team Canada, which hey, at least he's with Lance Storm, and at least Team Canada is being treated like kind of somewhat of a big deal. But then next up was Sting versus Vampiro. Started off as teammates. Then Vampiro turned on Sting, which of course, for Sting and being turned on is another legendary combination. But Vampiro turned on Sting, and they feuded for a lot of 2000 thereafter. But then finally, the big one, the WWF buyout. Yes, WWF bought their competition, WCW, and admittedly, kind of the lasting effects of that buyout is something I want to make a separate video about. That will happen at some point in the future. But yeah, so WWF, I should say, bought out WCW, leading to even Vince McMahon appearing on WCW programming, talking about buying his competition, and that the fate of WCW was in his hands, which is pretty crazy. You think about, but he bought them out, bought out ECW as well, and pretty much monopolized the wrestling market. He brought his two biggest competitions, and that's pretty much how the Monday Night Wars ended. But it's worth mentioning, WCW was set to undergo yet another reboot and kind of another change. They were gonna take some time off, be off TV, and then come back with a whole totally different and new format. But they had their plug pulled by the network, even though Ted Turner fought against it. Unfortunately, the plug was pulled, and WCW was brought out by WWF. Pretty much how the Monday Night Wars ended. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. I'm thinking about doing a full-on retrospective for the Monday Night Wars and stuff like that. But I'm not entirely sure. But I will give a number of my thoughts here, just in case I did that. video doesn't come to fruition. But as for MVPs, we have Steve Austin, and at least when he came back, and of course him eventually turning heel at WrestleMania 17, and of course, there's the Alliance storyline, the WWF versus the Alliance storyline. Admittedly, that's a story for a whole nother time, and we'll probably do that next year. Since we did the Monday Night Wars this year, we'll probably save that for next year. Only because I'm not as prepped to go into that, and there is some other stuff I want to do before the before the year is over. And man, can you believe the year is almost over already? But then we have The Rock kind of doing his thing as well. Then we have Kurt Angle, who's still a pretty big part, even after that initial rookie year of like 1999 to 2000. Kurt Angle still being a big part, and also a big part of the Alliance storyline. Same with like The Rock and everything. Kurt Angle even being kind of a double agent for the Alliance. But again, when we do the Alliance storyline, we'll go into more detail about it there. Then there's the tag team vision, as I mentioned, with like the Dudleys and Edge and Christian and the Hardys. There's the Undertaker, kind of, because Undertaker, I don't know if I mentioned this, but when Undertaker came back, he came back with a whole new gimmick. Actually, I didn't go into detail about the Undertaker's return. I just kind of mentioned it. So Undertaker came back, but he came back as Biker Taker. He came back as the American Badass. Would become Big Evil later on, but Undertaker coming back with a whole new coat of paint and a whole new look. And admittedly, it's more something that is beloved more in hindsight. But at the time, it was kind of weird. Undertaker, who was very gothic, very very undead, and stuff like that, coming back as like this biker and showing and being more human. He did get to show a lot more of his humanity and kind of his human side, which is nice, but it was kind of weird. And then there is Triple H. Now Triple H, unfortunately, tore his quads, so he missed the whole Goldang invasion. But Triple H still doing his thing as well. Really, he rising up to the main event level, for better or for worse. There's Triple H there. As for WCW, the list kind of small, but and that's the truth. There was Booker T. Which we'll get into it more, or when we get to the Bastard Beast situation. But Booker T got his time in the sun. Jeff Jarrett still being the chosen one, and Jeff Jarrett. Because of how Jeff Jarrett left WWE and how he left kind of the controversial circumstances, pretty much fired right on air by Vince McMahon when he bought out WCW on its last episode. But it did lead to Jeff Jarrett founding NWA TNA, so there's that, I guess. Then there's Scott Steiner, who really continues to evolve. And then finally there's the undercard, because the main event scene was kind of messy, but the undercard was still somewhat fun, and it kind of helped people take their mind off things. But yeah, so the Monday Night Wars, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. What do I think? You know what? I'll save it for the. I was gonna say what do I think ruined WCW, but you know what? We will do the retrospective, so I will save it for kind of the retrospective. But as for this episode, thank you all so much for watching, and I may or may not include the retrospective in kind of the compilation video that I do for like the Monday Night Wars. But nevertheless, in the meantime, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please do me a favor: like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends, and turn on post notifications so you know every time I upload a video, so you can see as it drops. And let me know in the comments below your thoughts on this episode of the Monday Night Wars and the Monday Night Wars as a whole. Admittedly, I do wish I would have went into a little bit more detail on some things, but this was a fun look back. Unfortunately, I wasn't there to watch it live. I was for like the real heights of it around between 1995 and 1999. I wasn't live yet. Then I came pretty late into 2000, September 7th, and then 2001 I was still too young and wasn't watching wrestling at the time. I was just a baby, so obviously I don't remember it in time. But going back and kind of looking at it, it kind of through the somewhat limited lens, and thankfully I was able to find a lot of the info, but still very limited lens. And I wanted to. I did kind of ask some people their kind of thoughts on it, and they were gracious enough to provide their kind of thoughts on it, kind of their take on what was going on with the Monday Night Wars at the time. But even with through the limited lens, I still had a lot of fun going back and looking into it. But nevertheless, in the meantime, thank you all so much for watching. And I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please do me a favor: like, comment, subscribe, and share with your friends, and turn on post notifications. Thank you all so much for watching. And I'll see you guys later. Peace. 5, 4, 3. Exploiting. There we go. Damn, I can't spell. Okay. There we go. Alright, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Alright. Hello, citizens of the Nigelverse. It's Niger once again, and this is the Monday Night Wars final analysis. So this is similar to the quote unquote retrospective videos that I normally do once I wrap something up. I decided I'm not going to call them retrospective anymore because kind of my definition of retrospective, or at least the one I was using for some of my videos, compared to the overall broader retrospective sense on YouTube, are two very different things. So because of that, I decided I'll call them final analysis. I don't know if this name will be permanent for them or if this will be temporary. If you have any other better name suggestions, please do let me know in the comments. But kind of wrapping up the Monday Night Wars. So the Monday Night Wars we wrapped up here on the channel a few weeks ago. Our analysis, our look, our coverage of the Monday Night Wars and a lot of what went into them. I'm seeing what happened when WWE and WCW went head to head. And spoiler alert, it didn't necessarily end well for WCW. So here we're gonna try to wrap things up. Now, kind of real quickly before we dive into it, kind of reflecting on our analysis of the Monday Night Wars. I think for the most part it went well. It was definitely a lot of fun. It was fun. It was interesting going back and kind of diving into the history of the time of the Monday Night Wars, because this was a very interesting time. This was a very pivotal time for a lot of fans. This is when a lot of people became fans of not just WWE, not just WCW, but pro wrestling in general. This pretty much was the big wrestling boom of the 90s. These are attributed to these two companies. The thing that got a lot of people into wrestling, and it's even better because we're kind of in another wrestling boom. We're kind of in another wrestling renaissance where wrestling feels hot again, where a lot of fans are being made, a lot of fans are coming back even, and wrestling seems to be in just as good, if not good, spots as it was back then as well, where a lot of people are tuning in. Ratings for the most part are up there. They still do falter from time to time, but that is normally when they're competing with stuff, and sometimes even when they're competing with each other. But with us being kind of in a wrestling renaissance in a way, that's what a lot of people have called this era. They've called it the Renaissance era that we're in for WWE, and to an extent AEW, just pro wrestling in general, I should say. But not only that, but going back in and looking at the history and seeing how it was back then and kind of comparing it to now has been fun and has been interesting. But at the same time, I feel like I could have delved into it more, and unfortunately, I do attribute that to kind of poor planning on my part, but also time constraints. Things I felt like kept coming up to where I had to push back and delay episodes of the Monday Night Wars. Or if I had stayed the course, or if I had ride the course a little bit better, I feel like I probably would have had more time, and thus wouldn't have to scramble to get episodes out, because sadly that's what I had to do towards the end, is scramble to get episodes out so I can finish off the analysis. And not out of malice, I want to be done so I don't want to talk about this anymore, but more so because I didn't want to keep you guys waiting on the analysis. of the Monday Night Wars, especially with it being so interesting to talk about. And in fact, I was excited to delve into it. This is exciting stuff, at least for me, to talk about, and hopefully for you guys as well. But unfortunately, things happen, and life happen sometimes. Life does happen, I should say, sometimes, and it definitely happened here. Things in personal life, and I know that's not really an excuse, but more so kind of an explanation. So unfortunately, didn't quite get into a lot of the meat and potatoes that I really wanted to. Who I feel like if I had more time and if I was able to really dissect it, I would love to dissect it even more, because there was because I do feel like I covered quite a bit of ground, and I do feel like I covered a lot of ground, but there is a lot of stuff I missed as well. I missed the Insane Clown Posse coming into both WWF and WCW, coming in with the oddities and everything. And Sable was part of the oddities before she pieced out. And I guess this is kind of the part of the video where I kind of do a last minute lore dump on most of the things that I missed talking about. It still probably won't even be everything, but I didn't talk about the oddities, that being Golga, aka Earthquake under the mask, or Kurgan, and pretty much such a gang of freaks. I didn't talk about Dark Carnival, well, that being when Insane Clown Posse then went to WCW. I don't even think I could talk about the Kiss Demon and kind of WCW's deal with Kiss, where they had to book the Demon and pretty much somebody dressed up as a Kiss Demon, that being Del Torborg. They had to book him in a main event, and so that was part of the contract they had with Kiss. So they made a special main event match to kind of get around with it, around for it, because the Kiss Demon wasn't main eventing. Although compared to some of the other stuff that was main eventing, he might have had a shot, but there was that. There was Goldberg's heel turn, which it unfortunately didn't really talk about. There was Kevin Nash versus Scott Hall. I did kind of bring it up when I talked about Last Call Scott Hall and them exploiting Scott Hall's drinking problems, but I didn't bring that up. I didn't really bring up the hardcore division in as much what they were doing at the time. I didn't even bring up 3 Count, that being Evan Courageous, Sugar Shane Helms before he became the Hurricane, and that group. I did bring them up, and Shannon Moore, the last person, and sorry about that, but I didn't bring them up, and they're kind of alliance with Tank Abbott, where he was kind of like the super fan and everything. Apparently, the rumor is that was supposed to be Tank Abbott getting a big head and then trying to take over the group and everything, but Tank Abbott did leave WCW kind of in the middle of the storyline. Not the first and not the last time somebody would leave in the middle of a storyline, but I didn't really bring that up, unfortunately. I didn't bring up Judy Bagwell on a forklift. How could you not bring up Judy Bagwell on a forklift? After probably one of the most infamously terrible, at least match gimmicks in WCW history. I haven't actually seen the match itself. I've heard it talked about and seen snippets, but not in its entirety. But trust me, it's on my radar, and it will be covered on the channel someday. Hey, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it definitely will be covered someday. Hey, so I didn't really talk about that. I didn't talk about Hogan kind of going pseudo dark side as he took on the New Blood. But I didn't even really delve in too much into the New Blood Millionaires Club kind of rivalry they had. But it wasn't just WCW that I was forgetting about. I don't think I mentioned Val Venus, his gimmick, that being in Adult Star, and then him joining Right to Censor her as well. I think I did mention Right to Censor, but I feel like I could have explored it more. I don't even think I mentioned Kai and Tai. And Taka Michinoku joining Kai and Tai. The heel Japanese group, and this was the 90s, so you can probably take a wild guess as to who kind of some of the things that group got up to. But there was admittedly quite a bit I missed, unfortunately. Now, of course, I don't have to 100% leave it here. I could always revisit it in the future, and considering I have an idea of what I want to talk about for next year on the channel, well, I probably will revisit it to an extent. But yeah, there was quite a bit. It's that I forgot, and there's probably even still quite a bit I'm forgetting. I didn't even mention the Public Enemy, how they signed with WCW came in from ECW, and the originators of using tables, or at least before the Dudleys did it, and they came into WCW. They didn't stay long. They had a cup of coffee there before heading over to WF, and by that point, a lot of people were upset. And you think tribalism is bad nowadays? They literally had the APA. I don't want to hear anything about modern day tribalism when the APA, hey, that being obviously Farouk and Bradshaw / Ron Simmons and Bradshaw, JBL, what have you, when they're literally sent to stiff the crap out of the Public Enemy and pretty much drive them out of the company, and they almost did the same to the Dudley Boys, but the Dudley Boys persevered and were rewarded handsomely for it. I didn't really talk about the Brood that much. I didn't even really talk about the New Brood that much when Gangrel aligned himself with the Hardy Boy. But again, some things were mentioned, but I really wanted to go even further with them. I didn't bring up Sandman and even Mikey Whipwreck being in WCW, who Sandman, of course, was hardcore hack. Well, that's one way of describing him, but that's just a joke. That's just a joke. Please don't get upset, Mr. Sandman. But that is just a joke. But yeah, I didn't even mention WWE's working relationship with ECW, or the WF, I should say, their work relationship with ECW, especially when RVD turned heel. I think that is where his nickname of Mr. Monday Night is not a nickname he used as often as some of his other nicknames, but I think that's definitely where it originated, because RVD did work a few matches on Raw, and lest we forget, RVD also as a kid was one of the kids that Ted DiBiase bullied when he was the $1 Million Man. So as you can see, I missed quite a bit, and I'm sure there's plenty that I'm still not talking about, that I'm still missing, but I can always revisit it in the future. But as you can see on the screen here, as you are probably waiting patiently, maybe in quotation marks, but patiently waiting for me to finish my spiel there. Here, you probably notice on the screen we have some of the highlights and some lowlights when it comes to WWE and WCW. We have the overall MVPs for both WCW and WF, and some of these may raise an eyebrow or two, but I will try to my best to explain myself. We have the best and worst WCW storylines, or at least some very notable ones that I thought were worth mentioning for good and for bad. We have, like I said, best and worst WCW storylines, and we did the same for the WF. We have what went right for WCW and what went wrong for WCW, and then what went right for the WF and what went wrong for the WF. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. So, starting on the WCW side, who were some of the MVPs of WCW who tried their best to wade through the muck and lead WCW to the hopeful promised land that they never quite did get? For starters, we have the NWO. The NWO honestly was a very big catalyst when it comes to really everything. Like we talk a lot about butterfly effects in pro wrestling. I think the NWO might be a big example of that, because they really set in motion kind of the idea of the cool heel and everything. As the NWO ran roughshod over WCW, Hulk Hogan was heel for the first time in over a decade, almost 2 decades, and the NWO pretty much with their black and white and that really awesome legendary theme song and those cool t-shirts that were just too sweet. I think this whole time the Monday Night Wars analysis, I think it's the first time I've actually used too sweet to describe something. How have I gone long without mentioning that? But the NWO being kind of the cool heel was in that regard, and helping do great business for WCW, who and also a lot that does come to Hulk Hogan. And now Hulk Hogan, and love him or hate him, he did help initially when it came to business for WCW. He definitely was a draw, and when he came in, people did take notice, even as far back when he came in as like 1994, when obviously he came in, of course. But yeah, Hulk Hogan, and definitely he did help out at the beginning. His presence, and again, love the man or hate the man, and he definitely did help business along in WCW. Then there was DDP, who really DDP had been around for a while. A lot of people compare DDP to, and it really should be the other way around, but a lot of people compare DDP to LA Knight. Nowadays, he's the guy who had been in kind of the who had been there for a while, been in the industry for a while, been in WCW for a while. Well, not really getting that time in the limelight, but especially within the Monday Night Wars and the era of like Nitro and everything, really rising up the rank, really becoming a major eventer, really becoming the people's champion in a lot of ways. DDP definitely really he stepped up to the plate in that regard, or I shouldn't say that. He had always been stepping up to the plate. More so, finally got his time in the sun, and a lot of people were happy about it. Then there's Goldberg, one of the a lot of people consider one of the few homegrown WCW success stories. In a very simple way, WCW managed to make and almost break a star in Goldberg. And it's such a simple premise, the character of Goldberg. He shows up, this big jack dude shows up. It's a cool entrance, and coming in from the back with the security, and then the pot pyro and everything. And he squashes the crap out of the guy. Then he leaves, and carries on from there, looking absolutely dominant. And they popped the world title on him, and they did kind of fumble him a bit towards the end, as a lot of people say. But otherwise, Goldberg definitely was a major success story, and to the point where WWE took notice and brought him in, and that ended up where it ended up. But mayhaps that's a story for another time. But next up is the Icon Sting, and this is really pretty much reintroducing Sting, and a lot of parallels between Sting and the Undertaker. And I think the Monday Night Wars, or around the Nitro / Raw era, is where people will bring that up, because of course with a new era came a new Sting, and Sting taking a lot of his inspiration from the Crow, becoming a lot more darker, a lot more broody. He almost in Batman territory, but Undertaker's got you beat air stick, and to an extent, but Sting reinventing himself, becoming the Eye of Justice, becoming even more of a star than he already was, pretty much going through his metamorphosis, and pretty much carrying the look that he carries up to this day. Sting didn't really go back to Surfer Sting after this, mainly sticking with Crow Sting, because it's what brought him so much success, and hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But next up is the Cruiserweight division, and for a lot of people, the Cruiserweight division was a very big highlight for WCW, who really helped revolutionize the way, not just that Cruiserweight a division of wrestling, but really all of wrestling, and a lot of the things that are commonplace in pro wrestling nowadays, from guys big and small, can be traced back, heck, in a lot of ways, to the Cruiserweight division, to guys like Rey Mysterio, or Eddie Guerrero, or Dean Malenko, or Chris Jericho, or Billy Kidman, or Juventud Guerrera, or Psychosis. It's the work that those guys are doing, among several others, of course, but the work those guys are doing, he definitely sent the ripple effects throughout not just WCW, but really all of pro wrestling, and And I don't think it's a coincidence, and it's definitely not an accident that most, if not all, those guys I mentioned would be in WWE. He pretty much after WCW folded and everything, they would be brought into WWE. Two mixed results, and no less, but yeah, would be he brought in, but the work that they were doing, and a lot of things that they were doing, and really sent those ripple effects that are still often felt to this day. Like I said, a lot of things you see nowadays have a lot of different origins, but quite a few of those origins you can trace back to the WCW's cruiserweight division. And but then next up I gotta list Big Papa Pump Scott Steiner. I talked about the metamorphosis of to an extent Hulk Hogan with like the NWO and everything. I mentioned the metamorphosis of Sting, but what about Scott Steiner going from mainly a tag team guy, mainly being with his brother Rick as the Steiner brothers, to really breaking out on his own, really becoming a major single star, and pretty much becoming the legend slash internet meme icon that we know and love today. Scott Steiner, his transformation, gaining all that muscle, really getting to show a lot, even more of his personality, especially as a heel, and especially on his own. Of all the cases, is of solo stars, or I should say, solo stars that started off mainly within tag teams. Scott Steiner's got to be one of like the biggest, in a way, success stories. And then lastly we have Jeff Jarrett, kinda. And the reason I say kinda is because we aren't fully in and boo this guy territory yet, like Jeff Jarrett would be in TNA, but we slowly are approaching it. That being said, though, Jeff Jarrett, it did become a really big star, especially after his return to WCW, who after his time in WWF, after he underwent his metamorphosis and became the Chosen one, and of course, there's him going over to WCW, being a major integral part in a lot of their story. He's the man with all the stroke in the company. And seeing his trajectory, and in a way, if we didn't get WCW Jeff Jarrett, we definitely wouldn't have gotten TNA. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, it's up to you. So Jeff Jarrett coming over to WCW, who some people liked it, some people don't. Some people like Jeff Jarrett, some people don't. And it's crazy that he's still going even to this day. He's still active. He's in an active storyline, kind of like an active rivalry with Hangman Adam Page to this very day. It's crazy to think just the longevity of Jeff Jarrett in pro wrestling. But now over to the WWE side, and the WF side. And mentioning a lot of their MVPs, he's starting with DX and Triple H. Now, I did list them separately here, DX as a team and then Triple H as solo. Because they definitely both were her big part. Triple H towards the latter part of the Attitude Era, especially after Shawn Michaels' first retirement and everything, but DX, a lot of the shenanigans they got up to, some haven't aged the best, but DX definitely were over like her. Meanwhile, Triple H, seeing him become a major level main eventer, some of it through his relationship with Stephanie McMahon, but I do think people forget how much legwork Triple H did in his own right as well. Seeing the transition of Triple H into the main event scene is definitely fascinating, and I would say for the most part he was able to hold his own in the main event scene. And lest we forget, he's the guy running the company nowadays. But next up, of course, you can't mention the Attitude Era, you can't mention the Monday Night Wars without mentioning Stone Cold Steve Austin, and arguably the biggest star of the Attitude Era, arguably one of the biggest draws within the Attitude Era. The pissed off Texas rattlesnake definitely provided a lot of memorable moments and a lot of classics within the Attitude Era, and to see him reach major pinnacles of superstardom, especially he's seeing his journey as he was in WCW, who label is unmarketable, which he kind of admitted he was at the time, but to see him really hone his craft and become the character we all know and love today, he becoming an absolute legend within his time in the Attitude Era, becoming arguably the biggest draw in the Attitude Era. Pretty much a man now synonymous not just with the Attitude Era, but now with all of WF, and definitely he had a lot, and definitely, like I said, a lot of memorable moments within the Attitude Era. Who could forget his constant wars with The Rock, with Triple H, with Mr. McMahon, and Steve Austin definitely was a constant presence. But next up, speaking of which, we have The Rock, young blue chipper, Rocky Maivia, ditching that bright baby blue, and the smiles and everything, and becoming The Rock, the people's champion, and everything, and through the Nation of Domination, really breaking off his superstar into superstardom, mainly on his charisma alone, of course. The Rock becoming such a major star again up until this day, seeing it through the Attitude Era, definitely. He very much a sight to see. He has the man with the best eyebrow in the business. Has really ascended it to the top, providing a lot of memorable moments as well, and of course the classic rivalry between him and Steve Austin, as well as him and Mankind, and then their partnership as well, which I don't think I've mentioned Mankind / Mick Foley in the WF MVPs. But I'm gonna talk about him here anyway, because as Mankind / Mick Foley, all he had given for the WWF, especially within the confines of the Attitude Era. Also a lot of memorable moments, a lot of scary moments as well. Such as the Hell in a Cell, one of the most legendary, iconic, replayed moments in WWE history. Whether he was Cactus Jack, Dude Love, or Mankind, and it's crazy how all three are vastly different gimmicks. But Mick Foley definitely did his part, or to the point where I am gonna add him. How could I forget to list Mankind on here? What a huge disservice. I do apologize. But of course we also have, and I really should add it before him, but we have the Undertaker. Or I mentioned the parallels between Sting and the Undertaker. Undertaker is also someone who reinvented himself during the Attitude Era, taking on more of an edgy persona, and being also part of some major rivalries within the Attitude Era. I think oftentimes he's definitely, especially when he's heel, boiling down to being a stooge for Mr. McMahon, but otherwise the Undertaker still did what he needed to do as well. And same with Kane, seeing Kane brought in and seeing his evolution through the Attitude Era, appearing more into his human side and everything, and while still being more so a monster. Later on, the Ruthless Aggression Era, not always as kind to Kane, but Attitude Era Kane, and the scary Kane, and definitely showing how to book a monster for sure. But you also can't mention the Attitude Era without mentioning Mr. McMahon. Now, of course, first, the documentary is out. I definitely do want to check out the documentary because it definitely seems interesting. But I'm mainly talking about Mr. McMahon, the character. But that being said, talking about Mr. McMahon, the character, Mr. McMahon, the character, they say every good hero needs a good villain, and for all intents and purposes, Mr. McMahon was the perfect villain, not just for Steve Austin, but for almost all the top heroes within the Attitude Era. And Mr. McMahon being based in reality, but being very, very exaggerated. It pretty much representing the corporate thumb that a lot of us find ourselves under, or which is why him getting his comeuppance at almost every turn at the likes of Steve Austin and and as well as other. There's just always so satisfying being a part of a lot of memorable moments as well. And you notice I mentioned that a lot, memorable moments, because the Attitude Era definitely had a lot of them. Same with WCW, of course, but especially the Attitude Era. And I think, and we'll kind of get into it. I think that's also what uh, really helped them out when it comes to winning the war, essentially. But a lot of that boils down to Mr. McMahon, who I'd argue might be the best character of the Attitude Era, because a lot of the going on from week to week, from pay per view to pay per view, did seem to revolve oftentimes around Mr. McMahon in one way or another, and Vince was not afraid to be the butt of the joke, and did his part, or for the most part, or in order to make the storylines work. And how often do you get to beat up your how often do you get to beat up your boss? And on live TV, and that's just in terms of storyline. Of course, don't actually beat up your boss. That's not a good idea. But yeah, so Mr. McMahon able to do his parts, the character that is. Like I said, the person, totally different story, and very interesting story. When it comes to the documentary, I definitely do want to check out the documentary at some point. But yeah. But next up, we have the tag team division, and the ones I highlight more specifically were the Dudleys, the Hardys, and Edge and Christian, really coming in and really revolutionizing the tag team scene. And again, excuse me, kind of later into the Attitude Era, especially around like late '99 to 2000. But excuse me, better late than never, especially when the latter part of the tag team scene revolving around those three teams were her absolutely phenomenal stuff, including the ladder match at WrestleMania 2000, the first TLC match at SummerSlam 2000, and of course there's TLC 2 at WrestleMania. Probably the perfect trilogy of matches involving those three teams. It was just phenomenal stuff. I reviewed these matches not too long ago on the channel, so if you haven't already, go check out those reviews. But yeah, just fantastic stuff. But and next up, we have the fun mid card storylines. Admittedly, that's probably why I didn't mention the storylines as much, because they weren't like super high up in caliber. But the Attitude Era did have a lot of fun things in the lower mid card, in like the mid card. Even the guys in the main event scene, oftentimes did. It usually gets something to do, such as like Val Venus or Gold Hust, or say, hey, the other members of the corporation, or just all kinds of fun stuff in the mid card. A lot of memorable stuff that wasn't necessarily in the main event scene, but you had fun in the mid card. And oftentimes, the main event scene is obviously on another level, another pedestal. But if you have a fun mid card, that doesn't need as much emotional investment because it's the mid card, or then and it still can be pretty fun. But now moving into storylines. So, some of the best WCW storylines, the best and worst WCW storylines. For the best, we have the NWO for a lot of the aforementioned reasons. Goldberg's streak for a lot of the aforementioned reasons, and how those were built up. And then we have the flock, and kind of the arc of the flock. Granted, kind of he for a little bit subordinate heel team, him compared to the NWO. But or Raven running amok in WCW, who Perry Saturn emerging as a star within the flock, kind of being the one to help usher in the freedom of the flock. Some fun stuff there, but some of the worst WCW storylines, and this is even the half of it. They say you don't know the half of it, you literally don't. Here, these are just some of the ones that really stuck out. We have Last Call Scott Hall, for a lot of the aforementioned reasons, exploiting Scott Hall's alcohol issues that he was dealing with actively. He on TV. On TV and off TV. but then incorporating it on TV. Now, it's one thing to incorporate real life storylines, real life animosity, things in real life to the storylines and incorporating them into the storylines. That's one thing, but you gotta draw the line somewhere. And I think this is one of those things where they definitely should have given it some more thought before deciding to go with the storyline. But ultimately, they did. And then, of course, the big one, on the one that a lot of people felt was kind of the nail in the coffin, that being David Arquette winning the WCW Championship. Something that wasn't his call, something he didn't even want to do, but it was to help out the movie Ready to Rumble. It was to help out the company, which I did. It unfortunately, one of the things I mentioned, time constraints as to why I didn't quite get into the Monday Night Wars like I wanted to. One of the things I did consider was reviewing Ready to Rumble, but sadly didn't quite have time for that. So we'll have to get to it some other time, maybe an awful month down the line. But yeah, and next I mentioned was almost everything in 2000, because 2000 in WCW was a very fun time. I mean, depending on your definition of fun, it was fun from like a slow motion car crash Schadenfreude kind of way, where just so much seemed like throwing against the wall, throwing the crap against the wall, seeing what stuck, and ultimately nothing did. There was some fun stuff in 2000, but a lot of it was pretty much the writing on the wall that WCW probably wasn't gonna last much longer. Right, and then finally you have the NWO, and I'm gonna get more into it if you're reading ahead to what went wrong for WCW. But the NWO they say too much of a good thing isn't such a good thing, and that definitely was the case with the NWO, with it getting so big, so oversaturated to the point where it was just way too much over on TV, and it really grinded things to a halt, because almost everything had to revolve around the NWO. Everybody and their mother was joining the NWO. At least DX knew to cap it off at like 5 at a time. Yeah, so the NWO getting way too big definitely was one of the major detriments when it came to WCW. As for WF, what was the best and worst things WF was doing at the time? Some of the best WF storylines. I had Austin versus McMahon / the Corporation for a lot of the aforementioned reasons. Very, very classic rivalry. One of the most, in fact, perhaps the most classic rivalries that, and almost all other rivalry, he's kind of that nature, the whole superstar versus the powers that be. He tried to emulate. Now, granted, they weren't the first one. In this case, WCW actually beat them to the punch with Eric Bischoff being revealed as the leader of like the NWO and everything. But it's one thing to do it first, but it's another thing to do it best. And Austin and McMahon definitely did it best. But next up was, for a lot of the aforementioned reasons, the relationship between The Rock and Mankind, both in terms of their rivalry and in terms of their tag team partnership later on, the Rock and Sock Connection, of course, producing one of the highest, I believe it is still like the highest rated Raw segment of all time, that being This Is Your Life, and a lot of the shenanigans, and pretty much that like classic odd couple pairing. But the success that they had, there was the DX Army. For the aforementioned reasons, a lot of the shenanigans they got up to, the Brothers of Destruction, that being Undertaker and Kane, coming together and forming a super team. Now, again, and when they were heels, I believe they were heels the whole time. They were the Brothers of Destruction. At least within the Attitude Era, they've reunited and feuded so many times. Kind of doing the bidding of Vince McMahon, but two very big dudes coming at you is gonna be scary. But next we have, of course, X-Pac and Kane. Speaking of odd couples, X-Pac allowing Kane and to find more of his humanity and everything, and allowing Kane to have more fun and everything, and which I get has made it makes it even harder when Xbox eventually turned on Kane, and yeah, they gave us all that just to throw it back in our faces by having Xbox turn on Kane. But it definitely was a feel good story for a lot of people. And then of course there's the Hardcore Championship. Like this isn't every storyline, just a lot of the ones that came to mind. But the Hardcore Championship, more specifically the 24/7 rule of the Hardcore Championship. They tried the 24/7 Championship. It had recently in WWE about 5 years ago. Man, that was 5 years ago. That's crazy to think about. But they tried in WWE, couldn't hold a candle to the Hardcore Championship, and a lot of the shenanigans Crash Holly got up to while being Hardcore Champion with the 24/7 rule. Well, too bad R-Truth didn't get to defend his at Funland USA. But some of the worst WF storylines, we have the Ministry of Darkness / the Corporate Ministry, and it does suck because the Ministry of Darkness is seemed like a cool idea on paper. Undertaker essentially leading his own faction and dark brooding gods. Think of the Judgment Day cranked, and think of Judgment Day mixed in with like the Brood cranked up to like 11, and throw in some House of Black there as well. But the Ministry of Darkness is just seemed kind of off for a lot of people. A lot of the stuff they got up to was kind of gothic and admittedly kind of weird. And then there was a Corporate Ministry with Mr. McMahon being revealed as the front runner. It's me, Austin, being revealed as the higher power, or should I say the Higher Power? But yeah, it definitely it wasn't the best for a lot of people. And next up we have exploding Road Warrior Hawk's drinking problem. As much guff as I gave WCW for Last Call Scott Hall, lest we forget WWF was doing it as well by exploiting Hawk's drinking problem, including him falling off the stage or being pushed off the stage by Draw, as a storyline that made a lot of people uncomfortable. I thought about putting the Blue Blazer / Owen Hart in there, but admittedly, A, that's a discussion for another time, and B, that was less of a storyline what happened obviously to Owen Hart and more of a freak accident. So, but like I said, that's kind of something for another time. So I'll hold on to that for now. But yeah. And there was the Brawl for All, whose ever idea it was to have shoot fighting on on TV, where several people got injured, and the guy who was even intended to win ended up not winning, and the guy who did win getting knocked out in mere moments by Butterbean at WrestleMania 15. Yeah, sign me up for more of that, please. But next up we have the Gang War, that being several factions and battling each other from week to week, including Los Boricuas as the Disciples of Apocalypse, the Nation of Domination, and I believe this is around when the Truth Commission was there as well. Didn't quite set the world on fire, unfortunately. A lot of people weren't fine with it. And then, last but not least, there was the artist formerly known as Goldust. As I forgot how exactly Goldust came to be the artist formerly known as Goldust. But what I do know is different outfits from week to week. Leave that to Seth Rollins, because a lot of Goldust outfits that he wore from week to week, he just got crazier and crazier and crazier, and was very, very weird. But I feel like people forget it. For as awesome as the Attitude Era definitely was, they definitely weren't perfect by any means. But what went right for WCW? The two things I think really went well for WCW was the initial success of the NWO, and the mid-card scene. For the initial success of the NWO, when the NWO first formed, it was a big deal. Having the New World Order of wrestling, a lot of people were getting into it. Hit a lot of people. They ushered in the cool heels. A lot of people were really loving the NWO. Even with the split of the NWO, when it got too big, the NWO Wolfpack was over like crazy. But But you also had the mid card scene, and even when the main event scene faltered, especially towards the end of WCW's run, you almost always had the mid card to help bolster things. But of course, what went wrong for WCW, as I kind of alluded to, was the oversaturation of the NWO. It got too big. It got way too big, and not even just too big for its britches, although some would argue it did as well. And Oh, but the NWO being constantly involved, constantly in prominent in scenes, getting way too big, having all these people. I wonder whose idea those were. But actually, I can't say that. According to Hogan, he never exercised his creative clause. Sure, and in other news, did you know I'm winning a Grammy next week? but um, but yeah, the NWO getting way too big, getting way too oversaturated. A lot of people did get sick of it, and then it split into several splinter factions. There was NWO Black and White. There was NWO Hollywood. There was NWO 2000. There was the LWO. Oh, there was even the BWO. I don't think I mentioned the BWO. Granted, BWO was a bit more of an ECW thing, although they did make their way over to WWF eventually. He as well as I believe they did have a cup of coffee in WCW as well. But NWO getting way too big, and something gets way too big, eventually it's gonna burst. And you blow a balloon up way too much, eventually the balloon can only take so much helium or oxygen, and if you're doing it manually, he to the point where it pops, and that's exactly, unfortunately, what happened with the NWO. More metaphorically, not literally. Hogan, Nash, and Hall didn't expand until they popped. That'd be very gruesome, of course. But the NWO got so big and so a balloon that it eventually popped, and it was disastrous, of course. But also too many bad decisions and too many head scratching decisions, and especially towards the end of WCW's lifespan. A lot of it was throwing things against the wall to make it stick, to see what stuck. And also a lot of the decisions they made. Why was David Arquette world champion? Why allow the NWO to get so big in the first place? It's why he messed up the finish to Starrcade 1997, and why have Kevin Nash win at Starrcade 1998 just to bring the NWO back together and make it the super group? Why is Bret Hart a part of the NWO? Why is Sting a part of the NWO? The group he had been fighting. So many weird head scratching decisions, and that had left a lot of people saying, huh? Almost all the time on WCW programming. Meanwhile, for the WF, what went right for them, and ultimately what won them the war, was of course the Attitude Era. Everything that went on during the Attitude Era pretty much was what won WF the war, essentially. The idea, not just of the Attitude Era, but their execution of it as well. It was a fun time, and it ultimately helped them beat WCW. And mostly fun storylines aside from the ones I mentioned in the mid card, so that you had something to look forward to in the main card, but you also had something to look forward to in the mid card as well. And a pretty strong main event scene. Guys like Steve Austin, The Undertaker, or The Rock, Mankind, The Undertaker, being in the main event scene. It was a pretty solid main event scene. It wasn't always perfect, but a pretty solid main event scene for the most part, and of course Triple H. But what went wrong for the WF? For starters, one of the things I have is that it almost took them too long to pivot. You gotta remember, when Monday Nitro started in 1995, granted, the NWO didn't form until Bash at the Beach 1996, but by that point, WF was still very much in the new generation era, and things were not going well. It really took some soul searching. It really took the drop in viewership for WWE to officially pivot to the Attitude Era and pretty much take a lot of the ideas from WCW. Let's not pretend that WWF didn't take a little inspiration from the competition, making their program edgier, having a group, having a major group and everything. They took more than a little inspiration from WCW. Let's not pretend. Let's not rewrite history. But almost taking too long to pivot. A lot of people were sick of the New Generation era. A lot of people were sick of the New Generation era even before like Monday Nitro. A lot of people are starting to grow sick of it. Just a lot of head scratching decisions there. Thankfully, they did pivot when they did, but if they had waited any longer, it might have cost them. And a lot of the controversial storylines within WWF. WCW had some controversial storylines, but as we sort of mentioned as well, WWF had them as well, and a lot of stuff they kind of got away with it back then because it was the 90s. It was edgy, but a lot of it doesn't really hold too much weight nowadays, and does look doesn't always age the best, as if we're being honest. But nevertheless, that's going to do it for my kind of final analysis here. So again, pretty fun look. Wish I could have delved in a little bit further, but technically this is the end of our look at the Monday Night Wars. But I do have one more video, kind of tying into the Monday Night Wars and everything that I'm going to be releasing later on this week. So definitely stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, this is essentially the end. So thank you for joining me on this journey. I am going to compile all the entire Monday Night Wars analysis together, or into a like long compilation video, so that should be out hopefully by next week. I'm gonna try to upload it on Monday. I tried to upload this on Monday. I'm literally recording this Monday night, but unfortunately didn't quite work out. But nevertheless, that is going to do it for this final analysis. It's like I said, had a lot of fun with this analysis. But in the meantime, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please do me a favor: like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends, and turn on post notifications so you know every time I upload videos, so you can see as soon as it drops. And let me know in the comments below your thoughts on the Monday Night Wars and do you think WCW could have had a chance to bounce back? Do you think that if that WCW reboot that was supposed to happen, if it did play out, if it did go as planned, if the plug wasn't pulled, if WCW wasn't bought, do you think history would look a lot differently? Do you think WCW would have held on a bit longer? Or admittedly, that's honestly a video for its own, but I'll actually leave it up to you guys. Do you guys want to see me talk about that in the future? But nevertheless, in the meantime, thank you all so much for watching. I will see you guys later. Peace.